Hello, guys. What's up? Okay, so today we're going to finish Owens, Joseph Smith, and Kabbalah. And we're going to watch Talk by Mormonism Live, Joseph Smith and the Occult. um, okay, so as usual at the beginning of my streams, I'm on partial shadow ban. Sometimes it's hard to find my videos. You can find all my videos at vincentbrunoshadowban.blogspot.com. You can't find the first 3 anywhere. Don't know why, but if you want to see those, they're all the way at the bottom. Um, okay, so if you give me a second, I just need to find the link so I can spread it. And put it up on my my blog. So just give me a second so I can spread it around. Hold on. Oh no, my computer's going slow. Well, let me do something else. Okay. So first, let me just put it on my blog really quickly. And then we'll start. Cinco de Mayo. Not that I care, but okay. And then just spread it on my Facebook. Just give me 1 second. One second, and then we're gonna start. Okay, hello? You can hear me? Okay. Okay, so let's start. We were on, we're still in Freemasonry and Mormonism. We're reading about that. That's what we're in. And it's Owens, Joseph Smith, and Kabbalah is the book that, or the article that we're reading. It's Joseph Smith and Kabbalah by Owens, if you want to find it. Okay, so let me go. And then we have a talk on Joseph Smith and the occult. Okay. Bennett claimed that in a revelation dated 7th April 1841, the day before he was made assistant president of the church, Joseph Smith personally commissioned him to establish an order of the Illuminati in Nauvoo. Though the organization was not then specifically called by this name, a revelation received by Joseph on the 7th April 1842 commanded formation of the kingdom of God and his law with the keys and powers thereof, and the judgment in the hands of his servants. More commonly called the Council of 50, the organization finally took form in March 1844. Joseph was soon thereof ordained king of the kingdom, a ritual of coronation, and also performed for each of the next two presidents of the LDS Church, Brigham Young and John Taylor. Whether Bennett got the idea for an order of Illuminati from Smith or Smith from Bennett is open to argument, but Ebenezer Robinson, editor of the Nauvoo Times and Seasons, until February 1842, and a contemporary observer, thought the stimulus arrived with Bennett. Here, Heretofore, the church had strenuously opposed secret societies such as Freemasons, but after Dr. Bennett came into the church, a great change of sentiment seemed to take place. Subsequent history links the idea with Bennett. After Smith's death, Bennett sought out the charismatic claimant to Smith's prophetic mantle, James Starge, and convinced him to establish the Order of the Illuminati. The Council of 50 in Nauvoo manifested a distinctly Masonic character, a Masonic ceremonial element where were incorporated in the council's meeting. A similar tenor emerged in Strange Order of the Illuminati. It was only a few months after the claimed revelation commissioning him to organize the Illuminati at Nauvoo that Bennett initiated efforts to form the Masonic Lodge, but Mormon historians have yet to specifically explore implications of another fact. Both the name given by Bennett for the organization, Order of the Illuminati, and the political concept embodied by the organization, the boy, Order, but Mormon historians have yet to specifically explore implications of another fact. Both the name given by Bennett for the organization, Order of the Illuminati, and the political concept embodied by the organization had a clear Masonic heritage. The parallel is so close that one wonders whether Bennett might have brought this and other more esoteric Masonic concepts with him into Nauvoo. At about this time, the practice of spiritual wifery or plural marriage was also introduced. Bennett made several exaggerated claims in his later expose about libertine sexual practices, claiming the women of Nauvoo were inducted into 3 ritual orders based on the sexual favors expected of them. Such claims are not tenable, but nonetheless, recent historians have noted the apparent association of the Relief Society with Masonry, and Bennett's more slanderous claims aside, it is a fact that the female leaders of the Relief Society in Nauvoo were at one time all wives of Joseph Smith. Whatever the actual relationship to the practice of Nauvoo, Masonic lodges have existed which did indulge in such practices, the most specific example being Cagliostro's Egyptian rite. By all report, Bennett would have had intimate interests in this sort of masonry. Or this sort of Mormonism, and it would be hard to imagine him not encouraging Joseph Smith about new forms of ritual marriage. In this context, another question lingers. Is it possible Bennett's meteoric rise to prominence in Nauvoo was related to some unsuspected Masonic factor? Did he arrive in Nauvoo claiming independent esoteric lineages of Hermetic or Masonic priesthood, or some ancient and occult knowledge? Declarations that Joseph, because of prior life experience and association, would choose to honor. Though Bennett finally may have been nothing but a talented charlatan, it must be granted that a complex legacy of spiritual insight was embedded in Masonic ritual, myth, and symbols. They had a history and a lineage reaching back many centuries into Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and alchemical gnosis. John C. Bennett may have brought something more than Blue Lodge Masonry to Nauvoo, and regardless of his true intention, what he brought may have been useful to a prophet. In Nauvoo in 1842 and after, I suggest Joseph Smith encountered a reservoir of myths, symbols, and ideas conveyed in the context of Masonry, but with complex and more distinct origins in the Western esoteric tradition. They apparently resonate with Smith's own visions, experience modulating his spiritual life from the time of his earliest institutions of prophetic calling. He responded to this stimulus with a tremendous creative outpouring, the type of creative response Gnostic myth and symbols were meant to invoke, and evidently had evoked across a millennium of history. But leaving Masonry, there were still another, more primitive transmission of this esoteric tradition that would touch Joseph's creative imagination during his last years in Nauvoo. Actually, I'm going to stop there because this is where it starts, Joseph Smith and the Kabbalah. So, okay. So let's start the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we proudly bring to you Mormonism Live!
Shut up and sit down.
Good evening. Hello?
Oh.
I don't hear anybody applauding out there. What's going on? What happened to the applause?
I tried. I put it on. It never works. Every time we try it.
We were talking about that before the show started, and Maven said she was going to try for that applause.
I'm going to try it anyway. I could hear
okay.
it. That's no
we can do it ourselves. We'll make our own applause. Thank you,
they're
everybody. Thank you, please. That's enough, really. By the more perceptive amongst you will notice that Bill Reel is not represented on the screen this evening. It is instead the amazing Maven.
Hello.
Now I am hearing the applause.
Okay. You are?
Yeah. Oh. It's so loud I can hear it from my underground bunker.
Nice.
Where's Bill? Bill's not with us tonight.
The backyard professor says he's been kidnapped by demons. That works.
He's been kidnapped. Well, he's not going to be here tonight, and he's not going to be here next week. So it's just you and me, and while the cat's away, the mice will play.
That is true. Without Bill here, we're going to go ahead and announce a contest.
Yes, let's make it about Bill.
Yeah, I don't know.
Nickname for Bill. No, actually, that's not the contest. Go ahead. You take this over. This was your idea. This is a great idea. I'll stop. Go ahead.
Okay, so the 100th episode is coming up, and so we want to do a t-shirt design. And since none of us feel particularly, I guess, adept at that, we wanted to go ahead and open it up and make it a contest for our viewers. So I think we're going to try to shoot for 2 weeks to take submissions in, and then once we get them all, we will post them somewhere publicly, either on Facebook or some other platform where they can be voted on, and then the winning design will be revealed on the 100th episode. So yeah,
really?
That is the plan. So yeah, for the next 2 weeks, and I think it would be just the normal Mormon discussions podcast email, which I don't have in front of me right now, but I can put it on and put it in the chat maybe after we introduce our guest.
So I want to keep him in the green room a little bit longer because he's largely the reason that we get started late. But this contest, this is specific to Mormonism Live. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's not the Mormon discussions general brand. It's because
it's certainly not the backyard professor.
100th episode.
Yes, this is not about the backyard professor. Sorry, Carrie. Although I understand that there are certain fans of his show, and I'm one of them, who's looking forward to getting some kind of t-shirt that has somewhere written on it the words, "Yeah, baby, yeah." I don't think I did that very well. He does it much better.
That would be good. He does have that phrase, right?
Oh
You
my
guys
gosh,
need
he
a
was just
phrase.
I think he was just calling me. I was just getting a call from Boise, Idaho.
Oh,
It's
that's
either
funny.
Carrie or somebody in prison. Could be the same person, I'm not sure. Anyway, sorry, Carrie. Don't talk to the cops if you're calling for legal advice.
He's
Just-
got the yeah baby in the chat here. Maybe
You have a
can
right
throw
to
that
remain
up.
silent. I advise you to exercise it. Okay, so we do have somebody who's very, very important. We've got, I think, the world's most renowned scholar and expert on Joseph Smith, certainly, especially within the 1920s and the 1930s. I know he's working on the 1820s. He's got 1830s covered in a publication coming up. In 1840s, he's working on. So this gentleman knows Joseph Smith, and especially during the time period we're going to be interested in tonight, because we're talking about the 1820s. We're talking about the visits, the yearly visits of Moroni, or whoever that character was who could only appear one evening of the year at one location to give information to Joseph Smith. And that person that we have on the show is Dan Vogel. Let's bring him on with a big hand, everybody. Whoa. Hello,
everybody.
It's looking dark there.
It's dark here and it's raining and you might hear some thunder and hopefully you don't lose connection with me.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a thunderstorm warning for Salt Lake, and I was thinking about that earlier. Like,
Oh,
I hope I
really?
don't drop out. So if something happens here, it might affect both of us. So
Okay.
So our
Weather's
event
great here,
might
so I'll
be
carry
solo.
on. I'll carry on in your absence. I've got the
Yeah.
slides,
All right.
except I don't have them. You have them, don't you, maybe? Okay, so Dan is here. We're things are lining up. The planets are aligning this evening because tonight is the it's pretty darn close to the equinox. Is that technically tomorrow? It's after midnight
Yes.
tonight. So this evening is not, but once you hit midnight, bam, you're into enchanted time. You're into the fall or the autumnal equinox. And we'll talk about that because tonight is, I believe, the 195th anniversary of Joseph Smith bringing the plates home from the hill. Well, he didn't actually bring them home from the hill, but he did bring them. I'll let you explain it. They didn't quite make it home for a while.
Yeah, we might get to that part of the story eventually.
I hope so.
It's also the 199th anniversary of when Joseph Smith claimed to have learned about the plates from the angel in 1823.
Oh, yeah. So we'll be getting to the bicentennial of that event next year.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you take
Now-
us? Yes.
Now, before we get on to Joseph Smith, I got a little surprise for our fan because we're going to talk about Houdini.
Oh, I love Houdini. By the way, we're all wearing black. We're all wearing black tonight in honor of
I'm wearing
Joseph
black.
Smith's visit. You're wearing black.
Mine
I'm
is,
wearing black. Yes.
Let's see, Signature Books Book Club.
Oh, that's very nice. It looks like it has some kind of a gecko on it.
Oh, it's a SB. Signature
Oh, okay.
Books Book Club.
It looked like a
So-
salamander to me. We're all wearing black tonight because this is coordinated in advance because that's what we understand Joseph Smith wore to the hill 195 years ago tonight.
He had to wear black and ride a black horse.
Yes. Well, we'll have to
Nice.
fight it out as to who's going to be Joseph and who's going to be the horse in this podcast. I know what part of the horse I am. So what is this about Houdini?
Houdini.
Yes, I
it's
love
the
Houdini.
It's the 110th anniversary of when he introduced his water torture cell over here on the left
Really?
in Berlin on
Oh,
September 21st, 1912. And this day, every 21st of September is International Escapologist Day.
I had no idea. I think I've actually seen that that water torture cell in person. I know he had several of them.
Really?
I've seen at least one of them. Yeah, earlier this year.
Yeah, it's around still as a kind of a antique. But
I know
so the other photographs on this thing is over here on the far right, you'll see, do spirits return? Houdini says no and proves it.
He was such a killjoy.
So, and in the middle on the top, you'll see him. That's Houdini sitting there at the desk in the a Capitol building, I guess somewhere in one of the rooms. It's a subcommittee that was considering a resolution, 8989, banning fortune telling in Washington, D.C. Coolidge was the president at the time, but Florence Harding, wife of the previous president president Warren Harding, she used to consult a psychic medium in the White House. Her name was Madame Marcia, who eventually wrote her own expose of herself when an astrologer ruled the White House was the title. When an astrologer ruled the White House. So she claimed that she played a pivotal role in the Harding administration. So this is what got Houdini's ire up, because he knew that it was all a bunch of hokey and tricks and things. And he didn't want congressmen consulting mediums in the District of Columbia regarding, you know, they would call up the ghost of, the favorite was Abraham Lincoln, and they would ask advice of this Abraham Lincoln's ghost on how they should vote on things. I mean, is that the way you want the country to run? So,
well, I mean, could it be any worse?
Houdini to the rescue.
Could Abraham Lincoln give us any worse advice than what we're getting nowadays?
I don't think so.
But this is something that's happened since then. I remember Nancy Reagan. There were stories about her consulting an astrologer to decide when her husband should take trips and when he shouldn't take trips, right? And then there was also something about and Hillary Clinton talking, maybe she was speaking euphemistically, I don't know, but talking with FDR's wife, and now I'm blanking on her first name. Her last name was Roosevelt. Eleanor, thank you. Yeah, remember that one? Talking with Eleanor Roosevelt. So this is something that's not just for 100 years ago, but that's fascinating. I mean, this is going on even now. Just maybe people aren't being so open about it.
So Houdini, behind him, if you see that picture in the Senate or Senate room, I would say, that's one of the senators that actually consulted mediums sitting right next to him. And Houdini would wave this envelope with $10,000 in it for any medium that can produce some kind of psychic phenomenon. And the room would go dead silent. So, so the mediums were all sitting behind him there trying to, you know, give him a hard time and making snide comments during the whole time. And there were fights. One of the medium's husbands stood up and almost punched Houdini in the face.
Wow.
I wouldn't want to try and punch Houdini in the face. He's pretty wiry. He's pretty strong.
Yeah. So this is a perfect segue into our subject.
If I were going to punch Houdini, I think it'd be in the abdomen when he's not looking.
Good one. Good one, RFM.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now we're going to make our way to Joseph Smith at some point. I feel certain of this.
Yeah, right now.
Know that it's the 100th anniversary of National Escapologist Day.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Joseph Smith's annual visits to the Manchester Hill, 22nd of September, 1823 to 1827.
He's trying to liberate those plates from the hill. It's a natural segue from Houdini.
So you like this little picture I made of people out there? Here's the guys working the rod in the front there, you know.
I thought either he was working a rod or he was just glad to see me.
Okay, Mae West.
But this is a great background. This is the only thing I had any involvement in, was asking you to come up with a spooky background. That was all my involvement. You came up with this, and I love it.
It's great.
Thanks. Okay, we'll get on to our. Well, one thing I need to mention before we change the picture here is that we're going to be talking about the occult, and the occult should not be confused with Satanism, which is commonly done.
No, that
Okay.
really pisses Satan off. He considers it a victory for Mormon. I don't even know what this means at this point. Please continue.
So the occult means it involves, or oh, do you hear the thunder? I hear the thunder. I told you it was going to be spooky.
Oh my gosh.
Involving or relating to the supernatural, mystical, or magical powers or phenomena. The term occult comes from the Latin word occultus, meaning clandestine, hidden, or secret, and refers to knowledge of the hidden, or nowadays we might say, knowledge of the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yes.
all. Nothing about Satan.
No, there's no Satan. There is no Satan in a cult. And there's no I in team. You just keep trying to get through these slides, and I'll keep trying to obstruct you at every turn.
No, it's great. Great. So there's, if you can change the slide there. Here we go.
I know this guy.
Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, 1729, made a very interesting statement. The astrologers with whom the country swarms at this time are often consulted about the critical times for digging, the methods for laying the spirit, and the like whimsies.
Wait a second. I'm sorry. The methods of doing what to the spirit?
Laying the spirits. That's just like controlling the spirits to keep them away from the treasure.
Okay, if you say so.
Usually involves a magic circle.
Yes, and the like whimsies, like laying the spirit. Go ahead.
Speaking incantations while you're circling it, and drawing it with a rusty sword, and having a stuffed toad and things like that. Those are whimsical. Don't you think those are whimsical?
It's whimsical. I love the word.
So do I. But it's typically Benjamin Franklin vocabulary, which renders them very necessary and very much caressed by the poor deluded money hunters. So they like astrologers. Money hunters like astrologers, and they pay attention to,
critical times.
Astrological things.
Yes, critical times for digging, right?
Stars, the moons, yeah.
Yeah.
So below that, we have a quote from the Smith's neighbor, William Stafford. Said Joseph Smith Sr. and Jr. claimed at certain times these treasures could be obtained very easily. At others, the obtaining of them was difficult. The facility of approaching them depended in a great measure on the state of the moon. New moon and Good Friday, I believe, were regarded as the most favorable times for obtaining these treasures.
That's very interesting. Of course, he says at certain times these treasures could be obtained very easily. Judging from their track record, I guess they didn't go out on any of those times.
Well, I guess they anticipated it would be easier, but really.
Yes. And now you're talking about the state of the moon.
I think the result was the same regardless. But
I think so too. By the way, can you explain for our audience what new moon means?
New moon. We'll be seeing that in a while, but the new moon is no moon.
Right. It's
the opposite of full moon,
Yes. So the moon is down the whole night. It's not anywhere in the sky. This is going to be an unusually dark night when there's a new moon, correct?
New moon. And dangerous to be about walking in the rocks and things.
Oh, yeah, just physically, not to mention spiritually.
I think the moon could be up in the sky. It's not that it's on the other side of the world, but just it's completely blocked by the earth from getting the sun's rays.
I think that would be an eclipse.
No, not an eclipse. A new moon is just because it's just the reflection of the sun is why we get the different stages, right? Or am I totally messing that up?
Well, it's okay because when it's a full moon, it's up from sundown to sun up the entire night. And when it's a new moon, my understanding is it's the opposite. It's the other side of the earth. That's why there's no moon in the sky.
I don't think so.
Right.
Am I completely wrong on this?
We're gonna let
What's
Dan
good?
settle
Okay,
this way.
yeah, I guess.
Well, what's going to block the light?
Well,
You
I
know,
mean,
you need something really big like the Earth.
but I mean, RFM's talking about where it is in the sky as far as like, would we
So
be able to see it or not? And I'm saying a new moon can be in the
No.
sky, but it's not got any reflection of the sun on it, and so it's completely
because the Earth
dark.
is in the way.
Yeah, and that's not an
But-
eclipse,
Have you seen the moon during the daytime?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the people on the other side of the Earth don't see it.
right. But that doesn't mean it's a new moon for them.
Yes, it does.
It does. Okay.
Well,
All
when
right,
it's a
we're gonna have
full
to-
when it's a full moon here, then on the Antipodes it's a new moon. Boy, we're never going to get through this if
I
we're
don't
going to
think
get
so.
bogged
Okay,
down on.
here we go.
Yeah, we'll keep
So
going.
now, yeah.
We'll just agree. We'll just agree that it's
Okay,
dark.
Maven, we got tougher questions ahead.
Yeah,
So-
we'll just agree
I
it's
got
dark
people
out.
in the audience telling me I'm right, and that's good enough for me.
okay.
Oh,
Next slide.
RFM
Next
is
slide.
right.
Logan says RFM is right, and that's good enough for me. The guy's a math whiz. Maven's right. Camille, what the heck? Okay, she's a plant.
Okay. See,
Okay,
we
I'm
started
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead,
We
Dan.
have a big controversy going, and we haven't even got to the subject.
You made up that
So-
account, didn't you, Maven?
Yeah, some apologists out there.
No, I believe this is the Camille that's been on Mormon Stories that was the assistant to a general authority. I feel like that gives her more say.
Wasn't she at the Queen's funeral recently? Oh no, that's Camilla. Never mind.
All right, here's my buddy,
Dan, go ahead.
Mike Quinn. We're going to talk about Mike Quinn and his great book, Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. So this is believing historian Mike Quinn. He says Smith began praying late Sunday night on the 21st of September, 1823, to commune with some kind of messenger. And that phrase comes from the 1835 Messenger and Advocate, the history Joseph Smith and Overcrowdy wrote together. Anyway, astrological guides specified that Sunday night was the only night of the week ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter, Smith's ruling planet, was the astrological symbol on his family's golden layman, or holiness to the Lord parchment, for summoning a good spirit.
Okay, so
Okay.
it's a good spirit.
It's a good spirit. And so on the left-hand side is Joseph Smith's Jupiter talisman. And on the very left side, you'll
At
see
the 9 o'clock
face.
position, right?
At the 9 o'clock position is the letter looks sort of like a 4. Well,
Yeah.
that's the Jupiter sign.
Okay, so there's
And-
the Jupiter sign on Joseph Smith's Jupiter talisman, and over here
Yeah.
on the layman.
On the golden layman.
And that's a fancy word for a parchment, a magical parchment. Is that correct?
Yeah, layman is a name for prince.
Is that the name of somebody in the Book of Mormon too?
Yeah.
Okay, it sounds familiar.
I have to ask, was it called a holy list to the Lord parchment before, or is that a, like
No,
a
that's
backdated-
that's actually written on there. So on the 3 sides, on the 2 sides and the top, it actually says you can't. We'll get a closer look. Turn it to the next picture. Okay, so see on the sides it says
Okay.
holiness to the
Mhm.
Lord. And then you can see the kind of 4 shaped at the top, also written in gold. This has been touched up from a black and white, actually. I wish I had a actual photograph. I've tried to get an actual photograph from various sources, but not lucky so far. Anyway,
Dan, can you tell us, just briefly thumbnail this provenance of this layman?
oh yes, this is the Smith family parchment. There's 3 parchments, and they folded them up. You can see if you look really close, they folded them up and put them in a little pouch, and it had like a little strap to carry around the neck, so it's like on your chest sort of. And then this one's called Holiness to the Lord. They have another one, Peter bind them parchment, but they would carry these, and it was handed down in the Smith family, in the Hiram Smith family. And Eldred G. Smith was the last one to actually own them. I think it's been turned over to the church now. And so this was handed down to the Hiram Smith family. So it has a provenance.
Okay, and this is something that Joseph Smith or his family would have had back in the 1820s during the treasure digging days?
Yes, and Quinn goes into a vast detail to show that certain parts of this were copied out of occult books, magic books, folk magic books, occult books, white magic, not black magic books, Christian magic, you might want to call them, because they usually believe in holiness to the Lord. They're not holiness to Satan or anything.
Right.
So,
and can I just mention that? Oh, sorry. Maven, did you have something?
My understanding was that with this kind of stuff, it was seen almost like scientific. That that it wasn't really seen as paranormal, but that they were exploring and learning about the world, in the same way that a naturalist might be studying, bugs and things like that. That these were all kind of in the same category to them.
Yeah, pseudo-scientifically, yes. They viewed it as being scientific, that it was a formula and it worked. It wasn't like in religion, faith, God does it or doesn't do it. This is like, if you do it just right, the spirits have to come. So
yes, the power of Christ compels you. And by the way, I do notice that here on this parchment, that right here with this design right in the middle, and then to the right on the 3 o'clock position, it looks like we have the 3 crosses from Golgotha to give it a distinctly Christian flavor.
Yes, exactly. Good point. Now, these 2 wheels that you see in the corners, there's 2 round figures with various symbols in them. That is copied from magic books or for occult books. One of the occult books that has this in it is Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, 1665. And he has them drawn out there, but he also, below that, has words that tell what they mean. So the one on the left says, "Whoso beareth this sign about him, all spirits shall do him homage." And that's what the treasure digger wants to happen. And the other one says, "Whoso beareth this sign about him, let him fear no foe, but fear God." So it is religious. All right. You're muted, RFM.
I did that on purpose. I was missing Bill so much. I wanted to hear somebody say his favorite line.
I think that's the closest you guys have to a catchphrase.
I know. You're muted. All right. So when it was put in that Discoveries of Witchcraft book by Reginald Scott, is that something that he thinks of as something that's bad that he's exposing? Or is this more of a how-to book?
Oh, Reginald Scott's book is very interesting.
Hello? 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 There we go. Okay, now you can hear me. All right. This is interesting. Finding things. I'm glad that we found this. Let me just make a coffee. I'm learning a lot. I'm starting to really get plans working in my head. So, there's lots of ways this could be tied into Noahidism and into the agenda to accelerate it. And that would include, well, anti-Mormon agitation, like saying, well, Mormonism is Freemasonry and is Noahidism, and so we should avoid Mormonism. But it also seems like we could probably get some Mormons to be like, we're being subverted here, and maybe we should try to do something about it. And there might be a Mormon anti-Noahide movement that might spring up. Like there's a tiny Catholic anti-Noahide movement. I'm going to be going on Eric Gajewski Tradcat Night again on the 26th. So look for that podcast. I'm going to be going on there. And there's a small Catholic resistance. He's the only, all the big major Catholic uh, organizations have gone Noahide. EWTN, LifeSite News, Life News, Catholic.org, those types of, the Church Militant. Church Militant is Noahide. People. Okay. Let's read Joseph Smith and Kabbalah in Nauvoo. In 1842, Joseph Smith most likely had touched the subject of Kabbalah in several ways and versions, even if such contacts remain beyond easy documentation. During Joseph's final years in Nauvoo, however, his connections with Kabbalah became more concrete. In the spring of 1841, there apparently arrived in Nauvoo an impressive library of Kabbalistic writings belonging to a European Jew and convert to Mormonism, who evidently knew Kabbalah and its principal written works. This man, Alexander Nabor, would soon become the prophet's friend and companion. Nabor has received relatively little detailed study by Mormon historians, and his knowledge of Kabbalah has earned only an occasional passing footnote in Mormon historical works. Nabor was born in Alsace-Lorraine in 1808, but during his later childhood, the family apparently returned to their original home in eastern Prussia, now part of Poland. His father, Nathan Nabor, was a physician and dentist whose family sources claim was a personal physician to Napoleon Bonaparte and whose skill as a linguist made him of great value to Napoleon as an interpreter, claims perhaps inflated by posterity. Like his father, Alexander became fluent in several languages, including French, German, Hebrew, and later English. He also read Latin and Greek. Family tradition claims that as the first child and eldest son, his father wished him to become a rabbi, and that the young neighbor was started in rabbinical training. However, at age 17, he instead entered the University of Berlin to study dentistry and completed his study around 1828. However, shortly afterwards, he converted to Christianity and migrated to Preston, England. There, he established a dental practice and married in 1833. In midsummer 1837, Heber C. Kimball, Orson Hyde, and Joseph Fielding arrived in Preston. Neighbor had been troubled by several dreams about a mysterious book, and his first question for Joseph Smith's apostle was whether they had a book for him, which of course they did. He was baptized with his family the next spring. On April 5th, February 1841, they departed from Nauvoo, arriving in Quincy, Illinois on 17th April 4th. Days later, April 17th of April. 4 days later, his neighbors met Joseph Smith, and on the 26th of April, he notes in his journal, went to work for J. Smith. 2 days later, he acquired a quarter-acre lot in Nauvoo, and on the 1st of June, moved his family into their newly completed Nauvoo home on Water Street, a few blocks from the Smiths' residence. Where and now Nabor first came in contact with Kabbalah remains a mystery, though a careful evaluation of his history and personal travels offers a few hints. Given his father's position, his childhood in Western Poland, his studies in Berlin, and his subsequent conversion to Christianity, some contact with a reservoir of Kabbalistic knowledge among Sabbatean or Frankish Jews should be considered. If he did indeed undertake rabbinical studies in Poland prior to his university education, he could not have avoided some exposure to the subject. That Nabor brought a knowledge of Kabbalah to Nauvoo has been mentioned in several studies of the period. For instance, Newell and Avery note in their biography of Emma Smith through Alexander Nabor, Joseph Smith had access to ancient Jewish rites called Kabbalism. At the same time, he claimed to be translating the papyri from the Egyptian mummies, which became his Book of Abraham. However, that he not only knew something of Kabbalah, but apparently possessed a collection of original Jewish Kabbalistic works in Nauvoo is documented in material almost totally overlooked by Mormon historians. In June 1843, Nabor published in Times and Seasons a short piece entitled The Jews. The work ran in two installments in the issue of the 1st of June and the 15th of June. As to why he wrote this piece, he stated only that his effort was inspired by a talking he had heard Joseph Smith present. His essay deals ostensibly with the concept of resurrection held by the Jews. What he discussed for the most part is, however, the Kabbalistic concept of Gilgul, the transmigration or rebirth of souls. This essay is interesting not because of his comments on resurrection, but because of his repeated citation of classic Jewish Kabbalistic texts. In the course of his 4-page piece, Niebuhr cites over 24 texts and authors. Of the citation, I have been able to identify at least 10 are generally Kabbalistic authors or works. The tone of the entire piece and the authoritative use of Kabbalistic materials suggest Niebuhr's respect for Kabbalah. Niebuhr's notation to these medieval and Renaissance Jewish works illustrated that he probably both possessed the text and had a general knowledge of their contents. Although transliterations of Hebrew into English remain variable even in modern publications, Neighbor's renderings into English of the title and authors cited are fairly consistent and accurate to the original Hebrew. The general precision of this numerous citations suggests Neighbor had access to the works he quoted. Included among his citations are several classic Kabbalistic texts, the most important Jewish Kabbalistic manuscripts circulated between the 14th and 17th century, works such as the Zohar, Midrash, Ha-Nilam, Menorot Ha-Ma'or, Am-Mekha-Melech, and the Avodat Ha-Kodesh, as well as few rare documents. Much of the material he cited was available only in Hebrew and to this date has not been translated and published. But any standard, these were unusual works to possess on the American frontier and certainly an extraordinary collection of texts to be found in the Prophet Joseph Smith's Nauvoo. Joseph Smith and Alexander Nabor were frequent associates. Nabor had been engaged by Joseph Smith a few days after his arrival in Nauvoo in April 1841. During the last months of the prophet's life, both his and Nabor diaries indicated that Nabor reads with a tutored Smith. During the last months of the prophet's life, both his and Nabor's diaries indicate that Nabor read with and tutored Smith in Hebrew and German. Given his friendly relationship, the interest of the prophet and the background of Nabor, and perhaps even the book in Nabor's library, it seems inconceivable that discussion of the Kabbalah did not take place. Kabbalah was the mystical tradition of Judaism, the tradition which claims to be custodian of the secrets God revealed to Adam. These secrets were occasionally conveyed by the moral tradition of Kabbalah through the ages, so it was claimed until finally finding written expression in the Zohar and the commentaries of the medieval Kabbalists. Books Nabor possessed in Kabbalah was books Nabor possessed. Kabbalah was the custodian of an occult rereading of Genesis and the traditions of Enoch. It contains the secret Moses, and it was a subject that Joseph Smith had probably already crossed in different versions of several times in his life. Can anyone familiar with the history and personality of Joseph Smith, the prophet, who restored the secret knowledge and rituals conveyed to Adam, translate the works of Abraham, Enoch, and Moses, and retranslate Genesis, question that he would have been interested in the original version of the Jewish occult tradition. And here in Nabor was a man who could share a version of the knowledge with him. Whatever reason for the similarities, it should be remembered that the Hermetic Kabbalistic worldview parallels Joseph's vision of God in many particulars. Not only might Joseph have been interested in this material, but he would have noted how similar the sacred secret tradition was with his own restoration of ancient truth. And perhaps Nabor, on a religious quest from Judaism and Kabbalah, Europe and England, to Christianity and Mormonism, and a new home in Nauvoo, so even amplified that intrinsic sympathy in his explications of the traditions for Joseph. Certainly, the first text Joseph would have confronted was the Zohar, the great heart of the Kabbalah. This is one of the works Nabor cited repeatedly in his article, and as the central text of Kabbalah is the key book any individual with Kabbalistic interests would have preserved in his library. Similarity with the familiarity with the Zohar was a given for Kabbalists, particularly one with knowledge of words as divergent as those cited by Nabor, all of which expound in some degree upon the themes in the Zohar. If Nabor had read to Joseph from any single text or explained Kabbalistic concepts contained in a principal book, the Zohar would have been the book with which to start. This might explain why in 1844 Smith, in what may be his single greatest discourse and in the most important public statement of his theosophical vision, apparently quotes almost word for word from the first section of the Zohar. Okay, let's keep listening.
Interesting. I first learned about the book as a magician.
Really?
So, yeah, I didn't even look at the occult stuff. I just looked at the beginning part that talks about actual tricks and how to do them. And so what Reginald Scott was trying to do was save the lives of these witches that people wanted to burn or kill or hang or whatever. He was trying to say, look, all these things that they've been doing, you think is done by the power of the devil. Well, it's just magic tricks. You don't need to kill these people, you know. And then the other part of the book was has stuff like this in it.
This is fascinating. So this is probably a source or something like it for these two wheels in the Holiness to the Lord parchment.
Yeah, and there are in other books, other occult books, these exact same wheels.
Very good. Why is it you're bringing this up to us?
So this is for Joseph Smith. This is a control. This has his sign on it. He conceivably, we don't have any, firsthand documentation on this, but you can conceivably use these in the performance of his role of controlling the spirits, trying to capture the treasures, to keep them from moving through the earth magically away from the diggers. This is what the treasure guardians were supposed to do, to guard these treasures, to keep them from being unearthed. And so you have to draw a circle around the treasure, keep the spirits out with this kind of help, and get your treasure.
Okay, very good. So if this has, as it does, the sign for Jupiter on this parchment, do you think that's an indication that Joseph Smith himself might have used it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's just inference.
Right.
An inference. Reasonable inference.
Okay.
Okay.
Next, should we go to the next one?
Yes.
There we go.
Oh, here we are. My friend Mike Quinn again states, Smith's prayer on the 21st of September, 1823 occurred once the moon reached its maximum fullness the previous day and just before the autumnal equinox. the full moon was the preferred time for treasure digging. But, you know, it was one time. William Stafford mentioned the new moon. There was other days that they would find significant. And it wasn't always exact, I don't believe, either. It could be near the time, or they still had
There's some
room
leeway,
leeway.
some wiggle room with the spirits.
Yeah. Okay, so then Palmyra minister John A. Clark reported that Joseph Smith often acted as a seer for the local treasure-seeking company, and that in the autumn of 1827, Martin Harris told him it was after one of these night excursions that Joe, while he lay upon his bed, had a remarkable dream of an angel who told him about the gold plates. So,
Is that the earliest? Is that the earliest? I guess recollection that we have, or of this dream of Joseph's. Is this the first one? RFM, you're muted.
John A. Clark's saying this in 1840 about what he was told in 1827. There are earlier dated accounts than 1840, of course. I mean,
Okay.
it's Joseph Smith himself, but
Right.
but he's telling a different version, as we'll talk about a little bit later. He's telling about a remarkable dream, but he's associating. The important thing is that he's associating that treasure digging preceded his remarkable dream, because the remarkable dream is happening on a significant night, and it was a significant night for the treasure diggers and for Joseph Smith to talk to a spirit about another kind of treasure.
Very good. Very interesting. Because I know that when I look back at what D. Michael Quinn wrote and what you've written and collected, there was a lot of treasure digging going on in which Joseph Smith was involved in the 1820s. But when I grew up in the church, and I mean from age 18 when I got baptized and thereafter, what I hear about is not the treasure digging. What I hear about is the angel Moroni appearing to Joseph Smith, beginning on the equinox of 1823, and then every year thereafter until 1827, on the same night, the same equinox, when Joseph Smith finally gets the plates in the autumn of 1827.
Yes, and so what we're going to be discussing here is how the story was sanitized from the folk magic elements. That when he first told the story, he's coming from a culture in which this seems perfectly normal and natural. As he gets out into the mainstream and starts trying to attract potential converts, and he needs to be more appealing to the mainstream Christian folks. This story doesn't really jive with them so as well as it did in his small community back in New York. So later, he starts sanitizing these elements out of his story and making it into a more biblical Christian story, sounding story. Not that he was embarrassed by this, but that it would attract more converts.
Right. And the natural mechanism, I think, for that is the movement of the saints from New York to Ohio, where you live. And now they're encountering all these disciples of Christ members who have now converted to the church. So there is already this audience early on that may be attracted more to a biblicized kind of church history involving Moroni.
Yeah. That's right. So, let's take a closer look at these, at the moon.
Charge your phone 40% faster with this new 4-port charging device. This $37 phone charger is taking the world by storm in the US. New groundbreaking technology can charge your phone's battery from 0 to 100% in record time and restore your phone's speed, performance, and battery life like it was when you bought it. but smartphone companies are trying their hardest to ban this device in the US. You might not know this, but smartphone manufacturers are deliberately downgrading your phone. It's called planned obsolescence, and it's a common trick used in the tech industry to make people buy a new phone faster to drive sales. And there's a 90% chance your phone is also infected with this. If you've noticed your phone becoming slower or acting up after a software update, it's not your imagination. Planned obsolescence is pre-built into software updates that make your phone's performance and battery life worse. They're essentially making your phone useless in
This is your moon for the whole month of September 1823, so we can look at it. So you see the 22nd. So he starts praying on the 21st, actually. It's not, he didn't go, he went on the date of the 22nd, but his prayer started on the 21st, then he went on the 22nd, and the equinox is actually on the 23rd. So it's close, but not very impressive, right?
Right, because
Now,
there's what, a 28-day, I think there's a 28-day, what am I trying to say? What?
Cycle?
Cycle, thank you, with the moon, right? From full to full or from any place to any place. And so, having said that, yeah, sometimes a coincidence is just a coincidence. And I sometimes get just a little leery, maybe too strong a word, but I always want to be very careful that things that are being set forward as being landing on a certain day really are and are not just off a day or two, because the further off you are, I mean, if it's right on, it could still be a coincidence. But when you start making room for error, then it's even more likely it could be a coincidence.
Yeah, so I think there's a reason for it being not exact, which I'll talk about in the next slide for 1824. So 1824, he goes back to the hill on the 22nd, but look what happens.
Bam! New moon.
You see, new moon that William Stafford mentioned, and equinox.
Right on the same day.
Right on the same day. And I think this was the key day, and he stuck with the 22nd because of that.
Okay.
And there was no exact day maybe on the other years. I don't even, well, the next slide, I'll explain a little bit more about what I think happened. So we'll take an overview of 1823 to 1827. So you see here we have in the third column over there, September 23rd is the equinox in 1823. And it's the 23rd on all the years except for the 24th. Now, so in 1823, you'll see the full moon is on the 20th, and the new moon is like way away, you know, like September 4th. And then in 1824, you'll see that the new moon and the equinox are the same day. Then in 1825, and I have a little asterisk, and down at the bottom, probably did not occur.
Yeah,
Okay.
So you're saying the visits on 1825 and 1826 to the hill by Joseph Smith probably did not happen.
Right. He made the story up later that he went every year. My reconstruction is that he went in 1823. He was told to come back in 1824, and 1824 failed because he got tricked. And that was the end. It failed. That was the end of the story. And for 2 years, he didn't really mention it. He knew the plates were up there. He talked about the plates. He took Samuel Lawrence to look at the plates on the hill, but he made no other attempts to try to get them on any certain day until 1827, where on the 21st, the equinox is on the 23rd, but on the night of the 21st is the new moon, which is the night he went to the hill in 1827 and took the plates out of the hill.
Okay, so there's two strong correlations with the new moon and the equinox, and that's in 1824 and again in 1827. Now, earlier you said something about that was significant to Joseph Smith in 1824. What did you mean by that?
Well, we'll get to that.
Sorry if I'm getting you ahead of your
We'll
slides.
get to. Well, I think everybody probably already knows, but we'll get to it.
Okay.
Okay, so next slide, we'll look at closer at number 1827 before we move on. So here's the new moon. So on the night of the 21st, the new moon, which goes all night. The 22nd is really from the 22nd to the 23rd, and the 21st new moon is from the 21st to the 22nd. Right?
Yes.
So he goes on the new moon to get the plates, and the equinox is 2 days later.
Yes.
But it's the new moon.
And it's also
Okay.
on a Sunday, by the way.
Is that
No.
The
Okay.
equinox.
Oh, the equinox. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
would that make a difference? Would Joseph care about that, like doing something on the Sabbath or not not really?
That was supposed to be a favorable day for Jupiter.
Yes.
Okay.
This trick to get gas for a penny is going to get banned in the US. This ex-programmer got fired from his job at a German car manufacturer.
So, okay, we'll look at the next one. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about how the story's been sanitized over time and changed, and some parts left out conveniently. The first item we'll discuss is the dream of a spirit versus vision of an angel. And Martin Harris reportedly said, Joseph Smith said that he had been visited by the Spirit of the Almighty in a dream, and after a third visit from the same spirit in a dream, he proceeded to the spot, removed the earth, and there found the Bible together with the large pair of spectacles.
Did you mean to do that?
No.
Was that Freudian? Because
Yeah.
you said he pretended when he proceeded to the spot. Okay.
So so he says the
So look
Spirit
at the
of
date,
the
look at
Almighty.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So does
what
that mean an
exactly that
angel?
means?
Yeah, what does that mean?
I don't know. But it's the Rochester Gym on the 5th of September, 1829. That's pretty early, huh? So maybe they don't get exactly right. I mean, some newspaper reporter, you're lucky he gets half of it right. So, especially when all this is new and people don't know what's going on. But he could have said the spirit sent from God kind of a thing. I don't know what the phrase exactly means. It would be an interesting study of itself.
Well, right, because in English, thanks for pointing that out, Maven, that it passed me by. The Spirit of the Almighty can mean the Almighty Spirit or a spirit sent by the Almighty.
Right. I guess that's what was confusing.
Or God himself.
Yeah,
Or God
that's what I would
himself.
think. The Spirit
Yeah.
of the Almighty, I'm
Yeah.
almost thinking is God.
Yeah.
That could be what it means.
It could. They may have taken it that way.
Something for a future show, maybe, to dig
Yeah.
into.
And this
But
next
at this early stage, nobody's talking about Moroni and Nephi. So
Right.
right, and not an angel either, I think.
They're not an angel either. Palmyra resident Abner Cole said Joe Smith Jr. made a league with the spirit, who afterwards turned out to be an angel. So that's pretty close to the truth.
That is. Oh, and by the way, we were talking so much about the Spirit of the Almighty and the Martin Harris first quote from 1829. I did not emphasize that he's talking about it being a visit in a dream.
Yeah.
From the Spirit of the Almighty.
Yeah.
Right. This going back to the second one though, making a league with the spirit who afterwards turned out to be an angel. It almost sounds like there's some trickery going on, or like an angel pretending to be something else. Am I the only one getting that as well?
So Abner Cole actually knew a lot about the Smith's money diggings, and he's the one in the newspaper, the Palmyra Reflector. He's the one that started publishing sections of the Book of Mormon, because he was publishing his Palmyra Reflector on the same press as the Book of Mormon, and he started publishing segments of the Book of Mormon, and Joseph Smith confronted him and said, "You have to stop. I have a copyright." And they had a little confrontation, almost a fist fight. But Abner Cole actually owned Miners Hill, the Miners Hill where there's a cave, and the cave has been recently uncovered, and you can go see the cave that Joseph Smith Sr. spent so much time digging prior to 1825. And Abner Cole owned that land, and Alvin Smith and Willard Chase hired Walters the magician before Joseph Smith was a seer, a prominent seer in the area. They hired Walters the magician, and Walters the magician was pointing out a place to dig. And then they decided, they fired him, and they hired young Joseph Smith to be the seer. And Abner Cole also said in the same Palmyra Reflector that the mantle of Walters the magician fell on young Joseph.
Right.
And young Joseph, according to Lorenzo Saunders, whose family was the one living on the land, renting from Abner Cole, where the hill was, Lorenzo Saunders said that Joseph looked in his stone and saw a golden throne and one of the Native Americans sitting on it. And so they were after this golden throne that was inside this hill. And Joseph Smith Sr. would dig day in and day out, according to Lorenzo Saunders. So Abner Cole knows what he's talking about when he talks about Walters the magician and this hill, and that it was a spirit that he originally talked about. And then later, when it became a religious, when it became known that it was more of a religious enterprise, it all of a sudden became an angel.
Right, and that's sort of what I see Abner Cole saying is it's June 12th, it's 1831, and I sort of see him as being his typical facetious self, saying that Joseph Smith Jr. made a league with the spirit, who afterwards turned out to be an angel. It was a spirit at first, and then they changed the language and started describing it as an angel. Is that what you read in that?
Yes. So Abner Cole is being satirical. Okay. That was kind of a style of the time, a political writing style, actually, of the time. And he even wrote it in, called the Book of Pukey, and he wrote it in a mock King James Version style. Well, that was also a style at the time where they would like the chronicles of so and so, and they would write a biblical sounding story, but it was kind of analogous to various political events that were happening at the time, and they would be satirical and make fun of the political scene at the time. And so Abner Cole is kind of using that style to talk about what Joseph Smith is doing.
Mm-hmm. And
so he's
once you've read the book of, I was going to say, once you've read the Book of Pukey, you have to make a visit to the Golden Throne. Okay, so there's more quotes on this slide. We better read those.
Oh yeah. Okay. So, fellow money digger Willard Chase claimed, Joseph Smith Sr. related to me the following story, that some years ago a spirit had appeared to Joseph, his son, in a vision. So don't let vision throw you off, because Joseph Smith Sr. had dreams that he called visions, just like Lehi in the Book of Mormon.
All right. Next slide.
Next slide. This one's kind of fun. This is Moroni versus Nephi. I think a lot of the viewers already know about this.
Let's see. Hello? 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 There we go. You can hear me now. Takes a while for the sound to kick back on. Okay, let's keep reading. So now we're at Kabbalah and Mormon doctrine, the King Foley discussion. Hold on. On Sunday afternoon, the 7th of April, 1844, Joseph Smith stood before a crowd estimated at 10,000 and delivered his greatest sermon, the King Foley Discourse. Dissension, rumor, accusation, and conspiracy all abounded in Nauvoo on the pleasant spring day, and Joseph was at the center. This would be Joseph's last conference. 10 weeks later, he lay murdered at Carthage jail. In this atmosphere of tension, many in the congregation probably expected a message of conciliation, a retrenchment. Instead, the prophet stunned listeners with his most audacious public discourse, a declaration replete with doctrinal innovations and strange concepts that many of the saints had never before heard. As Fawn Broadies noted, for the first time he proclaimed in a unified discourse the theme he had been inculcating in fragments and frequently in secret to his most favored saints: the glory of knowledge, the multiplicity of gods, the eternal progression of human soul. Van Hell, in his analysis of the discourse's doctrinal impact, notes 4 declarations made by Joseph Smith, which have had extraordinary and long-lasting impact on Mormon doctrine. Men can become gods. There exist many gods. The gods exist one above another innumerably, and God was once as man is now. These were all concepts that could be by various exegetical approaches be found in the Hermetic Kabbalistic tradition. But even more interestingly, it appears Joseph may have actually turned to the Zohar for help in supporting his introduction of these radical doctrinal assertions. The prophet begins his discussion of the plurality and hierarchy of the gods with an odd exegesis of the first words of Genesis, Bereshita bara Elohim. I suppose I am not allowed to go into an investigation of anything that is not contained in the Bible. I will go to the old Bible and turn commentator today. I will go to the very first Hebrew word Bereshit in the Bible and make a comment on the first sentence of the history of creation. In the beginning, I want to analyze the word Bereshit, B-E-N-B-Y, through and everyone and everything else. Next, Rosh, the head, Ich, where did it part? The be there, but a man, a Jew, without any authority, put it there. He thought it too bad to begin to talk about the head of any man. It read in the first, the head one of the gods brought forth the gods. This is the true meaning of the word Roshith. Bara Elohim signifies the head, to bring forth the Elohim. If you do not believe it, you do not believe the learned man of God. No learned man can tell you any more than what I have told you. Thus, the head God brought forth the head gods in the grand head council. By any literate interpretation of Hebrew, this is an impossible reading. Joseph takes Elohim, the subject of Klaus, and turns it into the object, the thing which receives the action of creation. Bereshit, in the beginning, is reinterpreted to become Roshith, the head or head father of the gods, who is the subject actor creating Elohim. And Elohim he interprets not as God, but as the gods. Louis C. Zucker, who published an insightful examination of Smith's study and use of Hebrew, notes that his translation deviates entirely from the interpretive connection of Joseph had learned as a student of Hebrew at Kirtland. Joseph Sexius, the professor who had instructed Joseph and the school of the prophets in the early 1836, used in his classes a textbook had written a textbook he had written Hebrew grammar for the use of beginners. In the Sexius Manuals, page 85, the Hebrew text of Genesis 1:1 is given along with a correct word for word translation. In the beginning, he created God, the heavens, and the earth. Sykes would not have introduced in his oral instruction a translation entirely alien to the convention of his own textbook. Zucker comments on Smith's strange translation of the verse. Joseph, with audacious independence, changes the meaning of the first word and takes the word Elohim as literally plural. He ignores the rest of the verse, and the syntax he imposes on his article three-word statement is impossible. But Zucker, along with Mormon historians generally, ignored another eisegesis of this verse, an eisegesis which was a basic precept of Jewish Kabbalah from the 13th century on, and which agrees word for word with Joseph's reading. In the tradition of Kabbalah, Bereshit bara Elohim was most emphatically not an artificial three-word statement, as Zucker implied. Gershom Scholem, in the middle of a long discussion, explains this overview. The Zohar, and indeed the majority of the older Kabbalists question the meaning of the first verse of the Torah, Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning created God. What actually does this mean? The answer is fairly surprising. We are told that it means Bereshith through the medium of the beginning, the Chokmah or wisdom, the primordial image of the Father God in the Kabbalistic Sephro. Bara created, that is to say, the hidden nothing, which constitutes the grammatical subject of the word bara, emanated or unfolded. Elohim, that is to say, its emanation is Elohim. It, Elohim, is the object and not the subject of the sentence. Shlom's point is perhaps made clear by restatement in the Zohar and in the commentaries of the majority of older, that is 13th and 14th century Kabbalists. The verse Bereshith bara Elohim is grammatically turned around. Bereshith is understood to refer to the Sephra of Chokmah, translated as wisdom, and identified in Kabbalistic theosophy as the Supreme Father. The figure who is usually interpreted in Kabbalah as the first of the Godhead, Chokmah, then emanates or creates in the sense of unfolding the Elohim. As Sholem notes, the interesting thing here is that Elohim have become the object of the sentence and no longer the subject. This is precisely Joseph Smith's reading. This interpretation of Genesis 1:1 is not deeply hidden in the Zohar, but constitutes its opening paragraph and is the central concern of the entire first section of the long book. The Zohar begins with a commentary on Bereshith bara Elohim. It is written, and the intelligent shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and then they turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. There was indeed a brightness, Zohar. The most mysterious struck its void and caused this point to shine. This beginning, Rishith, then extended and made for itself a palace for its honor and glory. Thus, by means of the beginning, Reshith, the mysterious and unknown, made this place. This place is called Elohim, and this doctrine is contained in the words by means of a beginning, created Elohim. So far, this is exactly Joseph Smith's reading. In his eisegesis, Joseph takes Elohim, the subject of the clause, and turns it into the object which receives the action of creation from the first God image, here called Reshith, just as does the Zohar. Indeed, his words, as transcribed by William Clayton Rashid, signifies to bring forth the Elohim, are almost identical within the Zohar's phrase of the interpretation. In his next step of translation, Joseph Smith interprets Bereshit to become Rosh, the head, or head God. As Zucker objected, Orthodox standards of translations do not yield the word Rosh or head from the Bereshith, but it was not audacious independence alone that led Smith to change the meaning. A basis for this reading is actually found in the next verse of the Zohar. By Kabbalistic cipher of letters, a technique used in Kabbalah to conceal deeper esoteric meaning, the Zohar explains that the word Reshith is anagrammatically Rosh, head, the beginning, which issues from Reshith. To understand the fuller intent of the phrase, one must again remember that Rosh or Reshith is here interpreted by Kabbalah to be Hakma, the first God image, the supernal Father. Thus, in this text, receipt has been interpreted as an anagram for Rosh, who is understood to be the head god Hakma. Could this be what Joseph means when he says, a man, a Jew without authority, changed the reading of the word, perhaps by failing to understand the ancient Kabbalistic anagram? Finally, Smith translates Elohim in the plural as the gods. The word is indeed in a plural Hebrew form, but by the Orthodox interpretive conventions Joseph was taught by his Kirtland Hebrew class, which remained the normal, it is read as singular. In the Zohar, however, it is interpreted in the plural. This is witnessed throughout the Zohar and appears clearly in the following paragraph from the opening section of the work, where the phrase "Let us make man" (Genesis 1:26) is used as the basis for a discussion on the plurality of the gods. Us certainly refer to the two of which one side to the other above it. Let us make, nor did it do anything save with the permission and direction of the one above it, while the one above did nothing without consulting its colleague. But that which is called the cause above all cause, which has no superior or even equal, as it is written, to whom shall ye liken me, that I should be equal? Said, see now that I am he, and Elohim is not with me, from whom he should take counsel. With the colleagues explained the word Elohim in this verse as referring to other gods. I don't know why this was so hard to read for me. Okay.
Controversy about was it Moroni or was it Nephi? And Joseph Smith doesn't seem to know what the name of the angel is. What was this an attempt to avoid the charge of necromancy? This is my solution to that problem. In his official history, Joseph Smith said, he called me by name and said unto me that he was a messenger sent from the presence of God to me, and that his name was Moroni.
That's the version I know.
Yeah, that's the published version that everybody reads nowadays. But Book A1 of the manuscript history reads Nephi, which was published in 1842 without correction in the Times and Seasons. B.H. Roberts changed it to Moroni based on several sources dating both before and after the official history, where the angel was named Moroni. So the manuscript history stands out like a sore thumb among all the other sources. So like RFM mentioned in one of our conversations, that did Joseph Smith just slip as it had a memory problem or a accidental slip of the tongue kind of a thing? And I said, well, that's possible, but if it was, or if it were, intentional, there might be a reason for that.
Because this is actually being dictated by Joseph Smith in 1838, correct?
Yes.
And it's not published until 1842. I know Joseph Smith was busy doing a lot of things, getting arrested, spending, 6 months in jail, all sorts of things he's busy with. But it does seem interesting that Nephi is said by him, it's written down, nobody apparently corrects him, and he doesn't see fit to correct it, assuming he was aware of the error in the 4 years between.
He was the editor of the Times and Seasons at the time.
Right. So you would think he would have had more opportunity to correct this error if he thought it were an error than just when he's talking and making a slip of the lip.
Well, he may have overlooked it, and he may have intended to change it, but he didn't.
Okay. But if it were not a mistake, if it were intentional on the part of Joseph Smith, what do you wean from that, Professor Vogel?
Would it be an attempt to avoid the charge of necromancy. So unlike Moroni, Nephi would have been among the saints that arose from the dead at Jesus's resurrection.
Right. This is
So
very important.
He
for
would have had a body. He wouldn't have been
Mm.
talking to a ghost of a dead person. It would
Right,
have been like
because-
seeing Jesus after the resurrection. That's not necromancy.
Right. All the righteous before Jesus is resurrected are resurrected with Jesus. But
Yeah.
if you're righteous and you're after that point in time, then you're kind of, as a general rule, out of luck until the second coming, right?
Yeah, that's the story.
So if it
That's-
were Moroni,
That's theology.
so if it were Moroni, it would be a spirit. If it were Nephi, it would be a resurrected being. Is that correct?
That's what you would normally assume. Now,
So necromancy, that would be like calling forth, I guess, involves a body, right?
no,
I thought that
a
involved
ghost.
Oh,
A
it's okay,
ghost.
so a spirit. So
Uh,
he was saying he had changed it to Nephi because he would have been resurrected to avoid the
Yeah,
charge of necromancy, or do I have that
Nephi-
backwards?
yeah, Nephi died 400 years, before Jesus. So he was among the presumably among the dead that arose at Jesus's resurrection. Moroni died, like 600 years for Nephi. Moroni died 400 years after Jesus, right?
And can I suggest that
If he wasn't translated, but
if Moroni were a spirit who appeared
Yeah.
to Joseph Smith, according to all the accounts, or at least some of the accounts of Moroni, he's doing things that you would have to have a body to do, like toting plates from one place to another, even as a spirit, correct?
well, if they can move the treasure through the earth, they can do all sorts of things, I guess. But they could, if it were not a human and it was a treasure guardian,
Right.
then the treasure guardian could change form.
Oh,
which
we'll get
talk
to
about
that.
later.
Now I'm going to use that on you. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second, Mr. Shapeshifter. But what I'm suggesting is, just for example, the story about, I think it's, is it Martin Harris and going to get Joseph Smith and Oliver Gowdery and transporting him in the wagon, and they see the old guy with the white beard along the road walking, and he's got a sack of something over his shoulder, right?
It's a well-known story with David Whitmer.
Yes. I'm just thinking
So-
that
Yeah.
person with the sack over his shoulder, who Joseph Smith identifies as Moroni, probably needed to have a body to carry those plates.
Good point. And I
Yes.
just want to bring it back again, because there are some questions in the chat of what necromancy is. Would that involve a resurrected being or a spirit? So
No.
like, which one is the one that's avoiding the charge of necromancy?
Okay, so the necromancy, in my next paragraph, there's speaking to the spirits of dead mortals, which is talking to familiar spirits, would have opened Joseph Smith up to the charge of necromancy, a practice that was forbidden in the Old Testament. So the Old Testament doesn't know anything about resurrection, by the way. So wizards in the Old Testament talk to the spirits of the dead. And that was forbidden, and they would be put to death under Moses's law. So
Yeah, I looked
that-
that up, Dan. I looked that up.
Yeah.
There's at least 20 verses in the Old and New Testaments that talk about wizards in conjunction with familiar spirits and those that peep and mutter. You remember that, right? But
Yes.
there's also this passage from Isaiah chapter 29 and verse 4, where it's talking about the Nephites. At least that's how the missionaries taught me. It's talking about, and it says about the Nephite nation, right? And thou shalt be brought down and shalt speak out of the ground, and thy speech shall be low out of the dust, and thy voice shall be as of one that hath a familiar spirit out of the ground, and thy speech shall whisper out of the dust. Now, that was taught to me, and I've certainly heard general authorities, though not recently, talk about this passage relating to the Book of Mormon, and how when we read it, it does strike us as familiar. We recognize the Spirit of God in it. And that's why it's a familiar spirit, because it's familiar to us. And it came out of the ground in the hill Cumorah. So what do you think about that, Dan?
The Book of Mormon itself uses that phrase, one that has a familiar spirit. It's, and it tries to use it in that fashion. And but in the Old Testament, it is the familiar spirit is the spirit of a dead person. Speaking out of the dust, that specific passage is that in the commentaries, it usually talks about that that Israel will be beaten down and speak from the ground as somebody that is a ghost.
Right. And
so it changes familiar spirit to the word ghost in some translations.
I see. Yeah, the connection that I made, which was a long time after when I'm doing biblical studies, is, to much to my shock, I find that when it says familiar spirit in Isaiah 29:4, it's not talking about that we recognize it. It's talking about a familiar, like a witch or a wizard would have. And it's out of the ground in the sense that when they went to consult familiar spirits, they would dig holes in the ground, because of course that's where they lived. And this is very similar then to the story of the witch of Endor, I think it is, who summons the spirit of Samuel at the request of King Saul. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why
as I remember.
That's why that was considered to be so bad, because she's summoning a familiar spirit out of the ground.
Yeah.
So she's doing what she's supposed to do as a witch in old Israel, but this is where it's described and that connection made between familiar spirits being summoned out of the ground and speech coming forth out of the dust.
Good. Yeah. So another, I can hear your heart beating, RFM.
Was that me?
I don't know who it was. What was that noise?
I have no idea.
It is my brother just got my sister-in-law a treadmill upstairs, and they're.
Could you go upstairs and tell him to knock it off for another
I'm going
hour?
to send a text.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Okay. A lot of unusual things happening. I think that was the thing that goes bump in the night.
Yes. I know how that goes. Hey, by the way, I have my own seer stone that I brought tonight. And I keep looking at it.
I can't read it.
I keep looking at it. All I see is Spider-Man. What do you see? Do you guys see anything?
Yeah. No.
Okay, well, I guess that only works for me then.
We could save if we bundle with NJM.
Save us from headaches, too.
This guy is to blame for your boss being so rich, while you work tirelessly to pay for his beach house, his Lamborghini, and his kids' fancy college. Meanwhile, you're struggling to pay your mortgage, your credit cards, and try to save for your own kids' college. His name is Robert Owens, and he's the inventor of the 8-hour workday. The good news is that I am showing you this video to give you a free downloadable book that you can read in just one day, and will show you how to discover your natural talents so you can launch an online business and start winning at home and at life. By the way, my name is Jeff Lerner, and I used to make between $20,000 and $40,000 a year as a jazz musician before I hit rock bottom. And rock bottom, that meant $495,000.
Okay, so everybody can hear me? The next quote kind of brings us a little closer to what we're thinking of here. Apostle William E. McLellan asserted, Moroni was a disembodied spirit and hence could not appear unto man to give any manifestation. Therefore, the statement of his appearing unto Joseph to reveal the place of the deposit of the plates is false. I have no doubt an angel ministered to Joseph, but it was not Moroni.
What does that mean? Do you think he's talking about like an angel of the devil or something?
No, he's just saying disembodied spirits cannot minister to man because it's forbidden in the Old Testament.
So he's saying it has to be Nephi.
He's not. He's saying it was an angel, and of course, angel to Mormons means something different to
Mm,
Christians and the outside non-Mormon Gentile world. Angels are special creations of God, not dead mortals.
that's right.
Right. And Joseph Smith really is at pains to try and talk about the difference in the beings that can appear to you. There can be evil spirits, there can be the spirits of just men made perfect, and there can be resurrected beings. So
Yeah.
this is something
So-
that he was very much concerned with too, it seems.
So Joseph Smith more or less redefined the word angel to make it fit a more Christian narrative.
And you think that if he was intentional about his use of the word Nephi, it was in order to facilitate these problems that arose from having Moroni do all this stuff.
Right. So in the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about the timing of the Nephi designation. Joseph Smith concluded his narrative by explaining that upon his completing the translation, he delivered the plates to the angel and that he has them in his charge until this day, being the 2nd day of May, 1838. So from that, you learn that the naming of Nephi, therefore, dates to between the 27th of April, which is the date Joseph Smith writes in his journal that they began writing the history of the church in Missouri, and the 2nd of May, which this mentions the 2nd of May. So he's at least got that far in his history by that date, which then makes the Nephi designation date to somewhere around there. But give me a second here. Under the 8th of May, 1838, which is
6
just
days
a few
later.
days, yeah, only days after changing the name of the angel to Nephi, he records in his journal, also, in the after part of the day I spent in answering questions proposed in the elder's journal. In one of these answers, he mentioned Moroni being dead and raised again therefrom appeared unto me. Here, Joseph Smith reverts back to Moroni only days later, but takes pains to explain that the ancient prophet had received a special resurrection, perhaps revealing a concern that had previously led him to experiment with the name Nephi. That's my theory.
So when he says Moroni being dead and raised again therefrom, I would take that as meaning that he was resurrected.
Yes.
What do you think, Maven?
So, well, I'm wondering, so it was Moroni first and then Nephi and then back to Moroni?
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
When was it Moroni before, Dan?
Well, Oliver Cowdery in his 1834-35 history that Joseph Smith helped him write and published in the Messenger and Advocate in a series of letters to W.W. Phelps in Missouri, said that he gives these long quotes from the Bible about the gathering of Israel in the latter days, that the angel supposedly spoke to Joseph Smith on the 1823 visit. He says, and these are the words of Moroni. So that's probably the first time that I can remember that Joseph Smith and Albert Cowdery mentioned the name of the angel.
And can you tell us, though, what happens in Joseph Smith's 1832 history with regard to the angel's name of Moroni?
I think you should tell that.
Well, I'm going to try here, and you may correct me, okay? My understanding from talking to Dan is that the name Moroni does appear in that early history, but it is used in such a way as to make it sound like Moroni is one of the people, of course, who wrote on the plates. He's one of the prophets who wrote on the plates, but the angel who gives him the plates seems to be described as someone different. How did I do, Professor?
I guess I feel
it-
that I get better about, I guess, struggling to keep all of this straight, but I guess Joseph
Yeah.
couldn't either, so I shouldn't blame myself for for trying to keep
Well,
up.
so the 1832 history says the angel appeared to Joseph Smith. And when he did, he told him about the record that was written by Moroni and his fathers. So it makes it sound like Moroni's not the angel. So at any rate, this is my theory of why there's this problem with the name Moroni Nephi that's kind of been a puzzle for all these years.
Well, that's
So
very
the next one-
interesting.
Oh,
But so finally, they ended up
Thank you.
settling on Moroni, though.
yes, they settle on Moroni, and it actually appears in the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants that was published in September of 1835. In the expansion Joseph Smith made to D&C 27, and he added that Moroni and mentioned about Moroni with the stick of Ephraim.
Okay. So it seems like, if you're correct, then Joseph Smith tampered or attempted Nephi, perhaps to get him out of these theological problems he's getting in with Moroni. And then after he puts Nephi into the manuscript history in May of 1838, just a few days later, he seems to come up perhaps with a solution by talking about Moroni as being died and resurrected from the dead.
Right. So we're moving away from the spirit guardian, the treasure spirit guardian. We're moving away from that by naming it Moroni, and it being the dead, one of the writers whose spirit appears. And then he has a problem with necromancy and people criticizing him for that. He was criticized. One of the interesting times he was criticized for that was when in 1828, after the death of his firstborn, that they named Alvin, by the way, in Harmony, Pennsylvania, he and Emma went to the Methodist class in Harmony, Pennsylvania, and wanted to join the Methodist class. But as Emma's cousin, Joseph Lewis, reported, we thought it was a disgrace to the church to have a practicing necromancer, a dealer in enchantments and bleeding ghosts in our class. So
Bleeding ghosts.
Ghosts, ghosts with their throats cut, because the story of Captain Kidd is that that they
You had to kill someone over the treasure so they would guard it, right?
Well, and they throw the body in when you bury the trunk, and the spirit hangs around the body and scares people away. It's menacing, Okay, so and here we're going to move to another element of the story that has been altered to move the story away from the folk magic origins or original context of the story, and that is the vision versus seer stone. So in his official history, Smith wrote, while he was conversing with me about the plates, the vision was open to my mind that I could see the place where the plates were deposited, and that so clearly and distinctly that I knew the place again when I visited it. So he has a vision, and he knows where the plates are because of that vision. Well, the angel's speaking to him, but that wasn't the earliest account. That was the story in 1838. But Martin Harris knew an earlier version, and so did Willard Chase. So in 1859, Martin Harris reported, Joseph had a stone which was dug from the well of Mason Chase 24 feet from the surface. It was by means of this stone he first discovered these plates.
Boom.
So when he went up on the hill and he's trying to find the place where they are, he whips out his stone and hat and locates them.
Pardon me while I whip this out.
Okay. Something I would have probably said in the locker room. But
I'll let
Not-
everybody
not
in the
here.
audience. I'll let everybody in the audience guess what movie that's from.
Blazing Saddles.
Boo! Yes, very good. You already got it.
I said I would have said it in the locker room. Anyway, in 1833, Willard Chase recounted an argument he had with Smith about the stone. Joseph Smith, then observed that if it had not been for that stone, which he acknowledged belonged to me, he would not have obtained the book.
You see, this is so interesting because we have two accounts from people who definitely knew Joseph Smith at the time, talking about how he found the plates by use of a seer stone, by putting it in his hat, I would presume, the normal method. And then we get to the 1838 history, and now there's a vision that he receives. There's no mention of the seer stone being involved in the official church history. So he gets it by a vision, which is certainly more biblical, I think, than using a seer stone. And by the way, Dan and Maven, can I get you to comment on this? Because I think this plays into this. There has long been a tension among those who know that Joseph Smith used a seer stone at one point in his history. And when does he stop using that seer stone? And the question comes up, well, did Joseph Smith use the seer stone for translating something like, the book of Abraham, or did he use it for receiving subsequent revelations in the 1830s? And then there's always this transitional story that's told about how Joseph Smith finally got to the point where he was familiar enough with the process of receiving revelation that he didn't need a seer stone anymore, and he would just sort of receive it directly from God without this mediation of a rock. Do you think that plays into this at all, Maven or Dan?
I'm
Go ahead,
thinking,
Maven.
I mean, that's the apologetic that I've become familiar with as well, as like that it was, I guess, kind of like a tool in Joseph's early days, I guess, because he wasn't used to seeing, so he needed this stone almost like a crutch, I guess, to, before he could really get going on his own. But that has always been, I think, a recent argument made after the fact. So I don't know. I don't feel like that was in play at this time, but I haven't done the research that Dan has to know if this was ever something that came up. But that's my understanding, is that it's a modern kind of post hoc rationalization.
Right. Well, there's that I think it's a late recollection by Orson Pratt about talking to Joseph Smith while he was translating the book of Abraham, I think. And, he starts glowing. Everybody glows at one time or another in Mormon history, whether it's President Snow or Joseph Smith. And he just got like this beaming face. And he's not using his seer stone, right? That's the story. And Orson Pratt says, how come you're not using your seer stone, Joseph? And Joseph says something about, I'm getting the hang of it. It's probably a little more inspiring than that. But this whole narrative that we get seems to fit with what you're talking about. That even now, where we're receiving more information about the use of the stone in the 1820s, where does that transition from using the stone to not using the stone anymore? And in other words, acting more like a prophet and less like a treasure seeker. When does that happen? That was a rhetorical
I don't know if
question,
there's I don't know if there's a clean cut, but he had more than one seer stone. And according to David Whitmer, he gave this brown one up to Oliver Cowdery.
Hello? 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 There we go. Hi, Bubblegum is here. That's nice. At least somebody's listening. He said, how are there any Mormons in 2020 is beyond me. I know it's a little bit silly, but they're here. They're here. And well, since you're bringing it up, I mean, I'm doing this. this is, you know, has to do with the Noahide project and stuff like that, and getting, I guess, you know, the point is to get Mormons on two levels. You want to get 90% of them, you know, Noahidizing, because, you know, you want to accelerate it. So the Mormons are already Noahidizing themselves. Just accelerate it. I think merging more of Mormonism and Freemasonry will help, and just talking about the topic of Mormonism and Noahidism will help accelerate it. But then there will be a small backlash, right? There'll be some Mormons who resist it and say it's not good and that they're being overtaken and all this other kind of fun stuff. Okay. Okay. So let's continue reading. Within this passage is both the concept of plurality and the hierarchy of gods acting with the permission and direction of the one above it, while the one above it did nothing without consulting its colleague. This interpretation is, of course, echoed in the King Foley Discourse and became a foundation for all subsequent Mormon theosophy. 2 months after giving the King Foley Discourse, Joseph returned to these first Hebrew words of Genesis and the subject of plural gods. Thomas Bullock transcribed his remarks on the rainy Sunday during Sunday morning of June 16th, 1844. This was to be Joseph's last public proclamation on doctrine. 11 days later, he lay dead. Joseph's first introduced his subject, the plurality of gods, then again read in Hebrew the opening words of Genesis and repeated his interpretation of Bereshith bara Elohim, using much the same phrasing recording 2 months earlier in the King Foley Discourse. He then turned to Genesis 1:26, let us make man, the same passage interpreted in the Zohar to imply a plurality of gods. After reading the verse aloud in Hebrew, he interpreted the text and found in it the same occult import given by the Zohar. The God which has no superior or equal, the Zohar's words, the head one of the god, Joseph's term, addressed the other gods, Elohim, in the plural translation, saying, let us make man. Bullock transcribed his remarks thus. If we pursue the Heb further, it reads, here he apparently read in Hebrew Genesis 1:26. The head one of the gods said, let us make man in our image. In the very beginning, there is a plurality of gods beyond power of refutation. It is a great subject I am dwelling on. The word Elohim ought to be in the plural all the way through. As he began his eisegesis of the opening Hebrew passage of Genesis in the King Foley Discourse, Joseph stated that he would go to the Old Bible. In Kabbalistic lore, the commentary of the Zohar represented the oldest biblical interpretation, the secret interpretation imparted by God to Adam and all worthy prophets after him. Joseph certainly was not using the knowledge of Hebrew imparted to him in Kirtland 9 years earlier when he gave his eisegesis of Bereshith bara Elohim, or plural interpretation of Elohim. Was then the Old Bible he used the Zohar, and was the learned man of God he mentioned Simon ben Yohai, the prophetic teacher attributed with those words of Zohar. Joseph wove Hebrew into several of his discourses during the final year of his life. In these late Nauvoo discourses, however, he interpreted the Hebrew not as a linguist, but as a Kabbalist, a reflection of his own predilections and the fortuitous aid of his tutor Alexander Nabor. Hold on. But in conclusion, we need to step back from this discourse of words and see that behind them resides a unique vision, a vision characteristic of the occult Hermetic Kabbalistic tradition. Harold Bloom called the King Foley Discourse one of the truly remarkable sermons ever preached in America. It is also a remarkable evidence of the prophetic visionary ties to the archaic legacy of Jewish Gnosticism and to the single most influential force in the evolution of Christian occultism, the Kabbalah. Okay. Christian Kabbalah, occultism. Christian occultism is the Kabbalah. You know, I don't know why Christians had to go dabbling in this and mess everything up and complicate everything. And I've really turned against the occult. I used to be so into it. I was an occultist, and now I'm just totally not. Kabbalah and Joseph, a legacy misunderstood. Kabbalistic theosophy was, if nothing else, complex. Different interpretations abound among Christian Kabbalists, removed from the original Kabbalistic foundation of Jewish culture and halakhic observance. We can imagine how easily such ideas might have been misunderstood by a concretely minded Yankee disciple of Joseph Smith. This may help explain a troubled conundrum of early Mormon theology. Brigham Young assertions that Adam is God. Brigham claimed that Joseph had taught him this doctrine, although there is no evidence that Joseph ever publicly avowed such a view. In Kabbalah, the theme is, however, prominent. Adam Kedman is indeed God, and his form is in the image of man, as noted earlier. Given the evidence that Joseph did know some elements of Kabbalah and had access both to the Zohar and to Jews and to a Jew familiar with a wide range of Kabbalistic materials, it seems probable that Brigham heard this concept in some form from Joseph. The Adam God doctrine may have been a misreading or restatement by Brigham Young of a Kabbalistic and Hermetic concept relayed to him by the prophet. More than one element in early Mormon theology suggests that subtle visions could be made grossly concrete. Perhaps the most striking example is the sacred nature of the marital sexual union and the human potential for multiple sacred marriages, a potential shared in Joseph's time by both women and men. As Bloom noted in Kabbalah and perhaps in Smith's practice, the function of sanctified human sexual intercourse essentially is theological. This was an important undertone in the wider circle of Christian occultism, eventually manifest in several occult Masonic societies. How Joseph interacted with the tradition and vision is the single most interesting and important issue awaiting historians of Mormonism. That this was an issue early in the life is witnessed by the need to marry and have Emma with him prior to obtaining the golden plates of the Book of Mormon. That the preoccupation persists throughout his life needs little argument. Ideas of sacred sexuality permeate Kabbalah, Hermeticism, and alchemy, perhaps touching even the mystical visions of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and his overtly Masonic opera, The Magic Flute. Man and Weeb and Undman, Rein and die Gothin Ani. Man and woman and man, together they approximate the divine. By investigating his depth, the legacy of ideas and experiences of Kabbalah and Christian occultism, we might begin to understand this perplexing vision shared by the prophet Joseph Smith. The Kabbalistic ideas persisted among Joseph's disciples and suggested in an intriguing piece of evidence appearing 3 years after the prophet's martyrdom. To understand this term, a more detailed understanding of Kabbalah as Joseph may have heard it is necessary. Briefly summarized, the most important symbolic representation of the structure of the kingdom of God in Kabbalah was the tree of Sephro. The tree was redrawn by Robert Flood, an important English Kabbalistic and Rosicrucian of the 17th century, in a slightly different fashion. In his figure, Flood uses the allegorical image of the tree with a root in heaven above and palm-like branches. At the bottom, in the Sephra of Malkuth, meaning foundation, extended into the earth, the tree is crowned. The crown represents Kether, meaning crown, and the first Sephra and principal god image. Below this crown, the tree branches into the other 9 Sephra. In the Latter-day Saints Millennial Star in 1847, an interesting figure appeared titled A Diagram of the Kingdom of God. See figure 12. Hold on. The artist and author of this small piece was probably Orson Hyde. Hyde's tree is also crowned and branches in precisely the fashion of Flood's tree. The only difference is that the high tree has 22 branches. This is a remarkable choice of number, as any student of Kabbalah will recognize. In Kabbalah, there are two important numerical aspects of the tree of Sephro. The first is the number 10, the number of Sephro. The second is the number 22, the number of paths between Sephro, one for each letter of Hebrew alphabet. Thus, Joseph Smith may have conveyed to one of his apostles, or Heidman may have independently found compatible with the prophet's teachings, the most essential symbolic element of Kabbalah, the mystical shape of Godhead, containing the image of the Sephiroth and drawn by a principal and influential 17th century Christian Kabbalist Flood. That interest in the subject of Kabbalah and Hermeticism persisted, and at least one disciple of Smith is witnessed by William Clayton. Clayton was Smith's personal secretary and one of his intimate associates during the prophet's last years in Nauvoo. Few, if any, individuals had a closer view of Joseph Smith in the Nauvoo period. This may explain Clayton's otherwise unusual interest in Kabbalah and alchemy manifested in his latter years. In 1864, someone in Utah loaned Clayton a guidebook of Kabbalah, a tract apparently containing several advertisements for esoteric materials relating to Kabbalah and alchemy. As one of Clayton's biographers writes, though the record is not clear, it may be that he wanted something akin to the so-called philosopher's stone of the ancient alchemists, a substance that supposedly enabled the adept, when applied correctly, to transmute metals. Clayton subsequently organized an alchemical society in Salt Lake City with himself as corresponding secretary, and purchased several mail-order alchemical outfits. The group, which numbered at least 26 members, spent months attempting to transmute metals without success before finally abandoning their project. Though it appeared Clayton was simply duped by a mail-order shyster, his esoteric interest in his faith in them might also be explained by some recollection he harbored about Kabbalah and the prophet in Nauvoo. Okay.
Shortly after the organization of the church. But there is some indications that he used it during the translation of the Book of Abraham, used a seer stone anyway, during that time.
All right, very good. So
it might have been associated just with translating and not with receiving revelations after a while.
Yeah. And yet there's that section 130 or 131. I think it's 130, talking about everybody who gets to the celestial kingdom gets their own seer stone with a new name written in it, which none know except he who receives it. And you look into it and you see things pertaining to a lower kingdom, a higher kingdom. And if you look into the earth, which has become a really big seer stone to everyone who inhabits it, that's the celestialized earth, then you can look into that and see things relating to a lower kingdom.
So, in which is written a new name.
Yes.
And so at this period of Joseph Smith's history, in the when he's 1823, he's going to the hill and trying to find the plates. He cannot mention the seer stone because he doesn't want to bring the subject of folk magic into his account. Everything's a Urim and Thummim, but he hasn't got the Urim and Thummim yet, so he can't use the Urim and Thummim to find it, because the Urim and Thummim's in the box. So he has to invent the vision of the mind. That's his only way out without mentioning the seer stone.
This is very, very interesting. Are we ready to go on to the next plate? By the way, some people are saying that this picture, this drawing of Joseph Smith with his face in the hat, looks like he's throwing up. This is what they used to call visiting the golden throne.
Well, he did like to drink.
The Technicolor yawn.
So
here we go. Next slide.
Okay, I knew that would get you to change this slide.
Okay, here we go.
Done.
Joseph Smith was instructed not to take the plates versus physically prevent it. Smith's 1832 history reads, I made 3 attempts to get them, and then being exceedingly frightened, I supposed it had been a dream of vision. See, there's a dream vision mixture that we were talking about earlier. The 1838 history says, I made an attempt to take them out, but was forbidden, like orally, I guess, by the messenger, and was again informed that the time for bringing them forth had not yet arrived, neither would it for 4 years from that time.
Can you comment on this, Dan? Because you told me something that I wasn't aware of when we were talking on the phone earlier, and that is that I'm very accustomed to hearing about the 4 years, right? The 5 visits over 4 years, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27 on the equinox. That is just drilled into my head. But I think you had said that the first time that anybody mentions these yearly meetings or yearly visits by Joseph Smith on the equinox to the hill was Joseph Smith in 1838, and it was right here. Is that correct?
Yes, this stands alone, kind of, or any history, any account that is derived from the 1838 history will mention this also, but it stands alone as mentioning the 4 successive years of visiting the hill. And I'll bring that up in a few more slides. Okay, so now the next account is the Oliver Cowdery 1835 history, which Smith helped to write. On attempting to take possession of the record, a shock was produced upon his system by an invisible power, which deprived him in a measure of his natural strength. He made another attempt, but was more sensibly shocked than before. He had heard of the power of enchantment and 1,000 like stories, which held the hidden treasures of the earth, and supposed that physical exertion and personal strength was only necessary to enable him to yet obtain the object of his wish. He therefore made a 3rd attempt with an increased exertion, when his strength failed him more than at either of the former times. So this is like very close to sounding like a treasure guardian guarding its treasure. But he's only heard these stories, not participated in spreading them, which is the truth. He's only heard of them. Yeah, right. He's the one that was spreading these stories. In the 1826 trial record, people are testifying that he told them that the treasure had moved away. He's giving those stories out himself. He hasn't just heard about them. He's a dispenser of this stuff.
Can I mention something by way of question to you, which is, I'm not the expert on treasure digging in the early 19th century, but I've heard many stories about how you didn't do the procedure absolutely correctly. You didn't bring the right person. I know you'll get to that in a few slides too. But I've never heard any story about how all you have to do is try harder.
Well, I haven't either.
Is this the only one? And is this the only account in the 1835 history in the Messenger and Advocate that mentions this particular reason that Joseph Smith was not able to get the plates on the first visit in 1823?
Yeah, this is it. This is they're waffling.
Yeah, that seems very different than, I picked the plates up out of the hole in the ground. Then I thought, I've got to put the big rock back on top so nobody finds the hole in the ground. So I put the plates down and I turn around and put the big rock back on the hole. I turn around and pick up the plates and they're not there anymore. And the treasure guardian or the spirit or whoever is laughing and pointing and saying, I told you not to take your eyes off the plates. No plates for you. Come back when
that is part of the story told by Lucy Smith and others.
And another one, like where he's shocked and thrown, like what it says, several rods. So this is just like he's just getting weak, or he's not able to exert himself enough. This is the one that like threw him.
Right. Well, you'll see Willard Chase, his account has that kind of thing in it. So the next slide will probably give that to us here. Well, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is the Willard Chase one. This is something like a toad. This illustration comes from Mark Elwood's his ongoing illustrated
The Glass
novel.
Looker.
Yeah, The Glass Looker, and he's continuing on. And I think this picture here comes from his continuing on. But so I used it. A little toad. This is actual toad, but the wording is something like a toad, which means it wasn't a toad. It was something like a toad, some supernatural animal-like creature. Okay, so
Like
Willard Chase. Yeah,
I mean, toads are famous to be familiars. Cats, toads.
this is a
From Harry
supernatural
Potter.
being.
That was one of the animals you could have in Harry Potter.
Oh,
Everyone
okay.
had to have an animal with them, right? And a toad was one of them, I believe. Toads and rats and cats and owls.
Well, toads are usually associated with black magic and Satan and bad things.
Yeah, and the rat I
Well-
think you're referring to as scabbers.
Yes.
Okay, back to Joseph Smith
Back.
and the toad in the box, or something like a toad.
Yeah. So Willard Chase reported a conversation he had with Joseph Smith Sr. in 1827. He took out the book of gold, but fearing someone might discover where he got it, he laid it down to place back the top stone as he found it, and turned around, and to his surprise, there was no book in sight. He again opened the box, and in it saw the book, and attempted to take it out, but was hindered. He saw in the box something like a toad, which soon assumed the appearance of a man and struck him on the side of his head. Not being discouraged at trifles, he again stooped down and strove to take the book, when the spirit struck him again and knocked him 3 or 4 rods and hurt him prodigiously.
Love
Now,
that
that's
word.
not a word you hear. That's not a word you hear very often.
No, and this is Willard
Yeah.
Chase from 1833, so an early reminiscence of an 1827 conversation with Joseph Smith Sr. And someone had made a comment about Mark Hoffman. And yes, I know that in retrospect, it's a lot easier to see things. But when you compare this account by Willard Chase with Mark Hoffman's forged account, it ends up looking pretty much almost identical, except he changed toad to salamander. Is that about right?
Yeah. Okay. So I tried to talk Quinn out of sticking with the salamander thing, but he stuck with the salamander thing, although Hoffman was the salamander, so-called white salamander letter was proved to be a forgery. But he liked the idea anyway of the salamander, because salamander could be associated with a good spirit. But I tried to talk him out of just throwing that whole idea out. It was.
Did you? You mean before it was known to be a forgery?
No, even afterwards, Quinn persisted in linking the toad-like creature with a salamander. But Joseph Smith knows what a salamander is. He didn't say salamander or like a salamander. He said like a toad.
Right. But wait, I think what RFM is saying is that Hoffman used this story to come up with the salamander. So not what Quinn said, but that this was Hoffman's inspiration.
So Hoffman changed it to salamander, and Quinn liked the salamander part, even though it was later shown to be a forgery, and he persisted in trying to put the salamander in the hole instead of the toad-like creature. Even after it was proven to be a forgery, Quinn still said, "Oh, I like the idea. I think he was probably right about the salamander." And I would say, well, it's yeah. Even though it was a he was a forger, and the letter was a forgery, he still thought Hoffman was right about the salamander.
Interesting.
So, and I said, forget about the salamander. Joe Smith knows what the salamander is. And he didn't say salamander. He said something like a toad. And the thing is that later in the Chase family, Orson Saunders, another younger brother of Orson, of Benjamin and Lorenzo Saunders, later in the 19th century said that it was a creature that had like sparkling eyes, and it puffed up into a bigger creature, and that knocked Joseph Smith off the hill into the valley. And so I think it was a supernatural creature, something that Joseph Smith had never seen before.
Very good. And by the way, I pulled up the Hoffman salamander letter. I'm not going to read all of it, but so that everybody can understand what I mean when I say that this looks like the story that was borrowed. Let me just go halfway through this. I don't think there's any periods in this. So let me just go here where this is presented as being written by Martin Harris. And he's talking about Joseph Smith Jr. And he says, in the fall of the year 1827, I hear Joseph found a gold Bible. I take Joseph aside, and he says, it is true. I found it 4 years ago with my stone, but only just got it because of the enchantment, the old spirit. Because of the enchantment, there should be a period, I think, there. The old spirit come to me 3 times in the same dream and says, dig up the gold. But when I take it up the next morning, the spirit transfigured himself from a white salamander in the bottom of the hole and struck me 3 times and held the treasure and would not let me have it because I lay it down to cover over the hole when the spirit says, do not lay it down. That's the relevant part, I think, of the letter.
I like this
Okay.
comment here. Could it have actually been a Ninja Turtle?
What? Well, if it were, the question is which one?
The one that does kung fu.
Don't they all?
Yeah.
It's like Michelangelo, Raphael, and then 2 other famous Italian painters. Boy, this is really going over well.
The question of Freemasonry at Decker.
It's all right. I don't know them all off the top of my head.
I'm sure the
Okay.
chat will tell us. They already are. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank goodness.
Okay.
Give them something to do.
We'll go to the next slide.
Okay.
So return every year versus bring Alvin next year.
Alvin.
This is the answer to our previous question. And 1824, why 1824 is so significant. In 1838, Joseph Smith said, the angel told me that I should come to that place precisely in 1 year from that time, and that he would there meet with me, and that I should continue to do so until the time should come for obtaining the plates. That's 1838.
That's where he starts talking about the yearly visits.
Yeah. Willard Chase said, he then inquired when he could have them and was answered thus, come 1 year from this day and bring with you your oldest brother, and you shall have them.
Okay, can I ask you something? I want to make sure I'm clear on this. Is Willard Chase now, when he's talking about bringing your oldest brother, who is Alvin, is he talking about the 1823 visit, the first visit of Joseph Smith to the hill, the first meeting with the spirit?
This is the first meeting, 1823. And Joseph Smith is saying, why can't I have the plates? And the treasure guardian says, you have to come in 1 year, precisely 1 year, and bring with you your oldest brother, Alvin, and then you shall have them.
Was there any reason given by the spirit as to why he had to bring somebody at all and why it was his oldest brother?
No.
Okay. Did that run into problems?
Yes, we'll get to that. Now, before we move to that, we have another similar quote, because some people, some apologist types might say, oh, that's Willard Chase. He's a money digger. He's trying to, injure Joseph Smith's reputation and all that. Well, we have Joseph Knight Sr., who is an early convert to Joseph Smith, but Joseph Knight Sr. was both a money digger and an early convert of Joseph Smith's. So he's in a good position to know what he's talking about. He said, Joseph says, when can I have it? The answer was the 22nd day of September next, if you bring the right person with you. Joseph says, who is the right person? The answer was your oldest brother.
So two sources.
Two sources, friendly and unfriendly.
One of our listeners suggested that Joseph was supposed to sacrifice Alvin. And another, perhaps not being as funny, Trevor Luke suggests that Alvin was supposed to be the prophet.
I've heard that.
Yes, that is the early Smith family tradition.
Okay, but he wasn't able to do that for some reason. What was that?
Well, next slide we'll find out.
Oh.
Ooh, not a good part of the story. Alvin dies
A couple months later.
Yeah, this is like 19th of November,
Brent
1823.
Gardner.
I mean, 2 months later. I mean, what's with this angel? Doesn't he know?
Is it an angel
being
yet?
Tricky, maybe, because he knew that he wasn't going to be there, so that's why it was his way of saying you won't get it. Just kind of like God was being tricky when Joseph asked if he would see the second coming, and he was told if he lived to be a certain age, he would. I kind of feel it's like kind of tricky stuff going on here.
Tricky, yeah, because the treasure guardians are tricksters.
And I've got to tell you, when you mention this story, I do think of David W. Patton, because he was one of the first apostles. There's a revelation that was received, I think it's still in the Doctrine and Covenants, calling him to go to England with some other apostles. And unfortunately, he got killed prematurely.
Right.
Battle of Crooked River, October 25th, 1838. He couldn't make the date.
Well, early Mormonism has a lot of these kind of stories.
Okay, this is just the one that this reminds me
But that's a good one. But that is a good one, yes.
Yeah, bring your oldest brother next year. Wah, wah. He passes away 2 months later.
So somebody was asking in the chat, when did this story come up? Well, I believe the story came up not in 1823 necessarily. Some people like Quinn thought, because Alvin was so anxious about the plates, and when he died, Lucy didn't want to hear any more about the plates because Alvin would come to their mind every time the plates were mentioned. That this story of bringing Alvin was known at the time in 1823, but it's also possible that Joseph Smith didn't give this as an excuse until he came back from the hill without the plates in 1824. Then he said, I was supposed to bring Alvin, and then we'll see what may have occurred because of that situation.
What might have occurred?
We'll go to the next slide.
Was Alvin still able to give Joseph a hand in getting the plates?
You'll have to inform us on that one after I read this.
Okay.
So we're now in 1824. Joseph Smith visits the hill again, and what happens? Willard Chase reported Joseph Smith went to demand the book, and the spirit inquired for his brother and said that he was dead. The spirit then commanded him to come again in just 1 year, 1825, and bring a man with him. On asking who might be the man, he was answered that he would know him when he saw him. Joseph believed that one Samuel T. Lawrence was the man alluded to by the spirit. Not long after this, Joseph altered his mind and said Lawrence was not the right man. Joseph Knight Sr. wrote, he went to the place and the personage appeared and told him he could not have it now, but the 22nd day of September next, he might have the book if he brought with him the right person. Joseph says, who is the right person? The answer was, you will know. So,
you're muted.
I know, I'm trying not to interrupt. See, this is how I keep myself from interrupting Dan. Oh, I think I just drove him away. No, what I was going to say is that Joseph Knight, in his Faithful History, right, 1845, says the right person. And Chase from 1833 says the right man, because we know by 1827 the right man is a woman. So Joseph
Right.
Knight Sr.'s accounts for it ultimately being Emma by making it the right person instead of the right man.
That's right. So the next slide.
Ooh, disinterment of Alvin's corpse.
Disinterment of Alvin's corpse occurred on the 25th of September, 1824, according to this public notice that appeared in the Wayne Sentinel 6 consecutive times, beginning on the 29th of September, 1824, that says, whereas reports have been industriously put in circulation that my son Alvin had been removed from the place of his interment and dissected. Therefore, for the purpose of ascertaining the truth of such reports, I, with some of my neighbors, this morning repaired to the grave, and removing the earth, found the body which had not been disturbed. I told you it was going to be spooky.
Right, and that's Joseph Smith Sr., who's subscribing his name to this, dated in Palmyra, September 25th, 1824.
Yeah.
And then he said, this method is taken for the purpose of satisfying the minds of those who may have heard the report and of informing those who have put it in circulation that it is earnestly requested that they would that they would desist therefrom, and that it is believed by some that they have been stimulated more by a desire to injure the reputation of certain persons than a philanthropy for the peace and welfare of myself and friends. So he actually, Joseph Smith Sr., publishes in the newspaper an account that there are rumors about Alvin being disinterred, and this is September 25th, 1824, so 10 months after Alvin has passed away, and just, 3 days after Joseph Smith would have been to the Hill?
Right.
For the second time?
Yeah.
So there's all these rumors out there about
going on?
Alvin, and they're so bad that Joseph Smith Sr. feels that he has to prove they're not true and go and disinter his own son with neighbors present to watch and witness.
Were there
Yeah, so
rumors though?
Were there?
Take it away.
Well, go to the next slide and we'll explore that question a little bit. So the fact that these rumors are going around is taken by two historians here as verification of the angel's instruction to bring Alvin. So as the official account, and Lucy's history doesn't either, mention anything about bringing Alvin, the requirement. We have quoted Willard Chase and Joseph Knight Sr. Mentioning that requirement. Now we seem to have verification in the newspaper at the time that there's a rumor going around about Alvin being exhumed. And why would there be a rumor unless there was some sort of requirement? And this is how it's read by even apologist Richard Anderson, who observed, apparently word had circulated of Joseph's instructions, and the false rumor was being spread that the Smiths had dug up or would dig up the corpse to fulfill the instructions. Father Smith was evidently pained that the family would be accused of such procedures, and so he took the action necessary to correct the rumor. So the part about had dug up or would dig up, well, the would dig up did happen. And so he got dug up. D. Michael Quinn argued that the disinterment of Alvin was a real fear based on instructions in occult books about raising the spirits of the dead with either blood or body parts of the deceased. because the exact day had passed, Quinn suggested that it, wasn't for that occasion, but the next year. He says, if young Joseph left the hill in September 1824, still thinking that his dead brother Alvin was the right person to bring in 1825, that idea ended with Palmyra's uproar over the possibility of desecrating Alvin's body. Maven?
So I don't know if this really still answers it, because I mean, so if the town was genuinely worried about this, I guess then there could have been the rumors. But I guess either way, it gives them the opportunity to have a good excuse to actually do it, to get anything from it, if that's what they were actually going for. So it's kind of ironic that it would turn out that way.
It's kind of like strange events, but at the very minimum, it verifies that the angel had instructed Alvin's body to be taken. So, and I take it a step further in the next slide.
Do you think, Dan, that it verifies that the angel said that his body was taken, or just that the angel had said to bring your brother in 1823 when he was still alive?
Say that again.
Okay, I understood you to say that you think that this confirms the fact that the body was taken, and I was wondering if that's the case, or if it just confirms the fact, according to both sides of the spectrum, and by that I mean Richard L. Anderson from the faithful perspective, D. Michael Quinn, I don't want to say the unfaithful perspective, let's say a different perspective, but they both come to the same idea that the very fact that all these rumors were obviously in circulation, such that Joseph Smith Sr. posts this notice about digging up the body, does tend to indicate that, yes, Joseph Smith did say that Alvin had to come with him, that the angel told him.
At the minimum.
Yeah.
At the minimum, it shows, as Quinn and Anderson are reading it, that Joseph Smith was instructed to bring Alvin, and that was the story in circulation. And if Joseph Smith had said this on his return, from the hill in 1824, and gave it as the excuse of why he didn't get it, that he was tricked by the treasure guardian, and he therefore cannot get the plates. It's over. That's the way I read it. It's over. He's failed. And,
right. And there's always these excuses, and I'm starting to get used to the treasure guardians. I feel like I've been out treasure digging myself and been disappointed a number of times. But this does strike me as a very similar treasure guardian, trickster spirit kind of thing that is told to Oliver Cowdery in sections 8 and 9. In 8, first off, you can translate, and you don't have to give any thought for what it is that you're going to translate, because God will give it to you. Oliver tries to translate. He fails abjectly, and now the Lord tells him that you misunderstood because you thought I would just give it to you, which is what he says in section 8. But now instead, you have to study it out in your mind first. In other words, there's an excuse that frankly sounds implausible to me, given for the failure to find what it is you were promised. In Oliver Cowdery's case, it was the ability to translate. And in these other cases, it's the ability to find the plates or the treasure.
And Joseph always has a knack for being able to get around whatever obstacles land in his way. I feel like we see this over and over and over. Every time there's something that should have stopped him or knocked him off his perch.
A new conspiracy of the gods.
Or ended Mormonism in the early days, like if we're going back to like the Kirtland Banking Society. There's always an excuse. There's always a revelation. There's always an answer. That revelation wasn't from God. It was from the devil. There's always some kind of a second chance. I think it's more evidence of that.
And here, Dan, you're talking about the part that this is 1824, right?
1824, but is this the behavior of an angel? Asking for Alvin's presence and then Alvin dying and then not getting the plates because you can't bring Alvin to bring somebody else. I mean, is this how angels carry on?
Well, but it seems like to me, since we know what happens in 1827, and at least the witnesses or the people who claim to see plates or whatever it is they see, right? And that, I know that goes on later into 1829 with the 3 and the 8 witnesses. But is there any indication from this that Joseph Smith in 1824, let's say, when he didn't bring his brother and he couldn't get the plates for the second year running, that was it for him, that he was done?
Yeah, right. I believe that's at that time, that was the end. And like I said, he knew the plates were up there. He took Lawrence up there. Lawrence saw them. And but yeah, as you'll see, I think it's in the next slide. That first we have to deal with my opinion, my published opinion here. And then we'll get to why I don't think there was a 1825 and 26 visit. So here this is me. I published this like 20 years ago, almost. Yes, I'm that old.
And this is Joseph Smith, The Making of a Prophet by Dan Vogel. I mention that because some people will just be listening to the audio of this, Dan.
Oh, okay. Very good. Questioning Joseph Smith Sr.'s explanation. Sounds a little fishy, maybe. Joseph Sr.'s explanation for disinterring Alvin's body is questionable because one should have been able to determine if the grave had been disturbed in the last few days without exhuming the body. It seems probable, therefore, that Joseph Sr. himself may have been the source of the rumor that the story was a ruse to exhume Alvin's body for its use in attempting to get the gold plates. Perhaps Joseph Sr.'s exuberance resurfaced as it had the previous year when he told his son, "I would have taken them if I had been in your place." Was he refusing to give up? If so, the incident would demonstrate how thoroughly the father believed his son's claims. So that's just an idea.
Well, it's a very interesting idea.
It's just an interesting idea. This bottom picture here is just a cemetery that sort of looks like where Alvin's buried. And that's what it would look like if somebody had dug up Alvin's grave a few days earlier. You would know like right away. You wouldn't have to dig, maybe, and harrow up your feelings as a parent.
So that would be really remarkable. I know there's lots of things that surprise me, but this whole idea about just disinterring Alvin's body is grisly and macabre enough. But to think about taking a piece of his body, because it was Joseph Smith Sr.'s own published statement that says that the body was still there and it had not been dissected. Why is it important to him to say it hadn't been dissected, do you think, Dan?
Well, some people think that they could have been for exhumed for medical purposes. But yeah, I think it could imply that part, like Quinn is implying in his explanation, that the occult books mention that you can bring either blood or a piece of the body up to in order to call forth the spirit of that person. You have a piece of their body there and the spirit will come, sort of like when you cut some pirate's throat and throw his body in, the body stays there and the spirit is around the body. It doesn't leave. It's in the vicinity of the body. So that was in cult books. So Quinn thought that the rumors that the rumors could, if they're not caused by Joseph Smith Sr. himself, by others who suppose that maybe the Smiths did get a piece of his body to fulfill the treasure guardian's request. So anyway,
Very
that's
good.
just a
Very
thought.
good. Yeah, I think that's an
Yeah.
interesting thought. But if those rumors were actually out there, and I'm guessing that they were, but those rumors then would have probably included rumors about taking a part of the body up there. Otherwise, why would Joseph Smith Sr. have been talking about he disinterred Alvin and he had not been dissected?
Yes, but here's the question. There's only one way for the rest of the neighborhood to have known about this request of the treasure guardian. It had to come from the Smiths.
Well, that's true.
If they didn't say anything, nobody would have been gossiping about it.
Well, it sounds like a lot of people had heard about this.
I'm just thinking they just had to be that weird family in the neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I did put in the ticker. It doesn't look like the normal banner, but I'm not seeing the normal one to put up. So I did go ahead and open up the lines. I think we've got about 1 or 2 slides left. But just to throw that out there, 1 slide left.
So what is the call-in number? Is it 662-667-6667?
Yes. 662 Mormons.
Perfect.
So yeah, and normally it's on. I just wonder if it is right in front of my eyes and I'm still like missing it somehow. But yeah, none of them.
So if anybody has a question for Dan Vogel and you've been dying to ask him, now's the time.
Yes. Okay. Should we go to the next slide?
If I don't know the answer, I'll make it up.
Okay. There you
Perfect. You've been studying Joseph Smith too long.
There you go.
So let's see our last slide here. I'm trying to remember. Oh, okay. Oh, no visits in 1825 and 1826. This is finally it. Huh? Okay. So in the 1838, history is alone in mentioning annual visits to the hill. Smith and Cowdery's 1835 history states, from this time, 1823 to September 1827, few occurrences worthy of note transpired. Lucy Smith, who did not mention the 1824 visit without Alvin, makes it clear in her history that there was no anticipation connected to 22nd of September 1827. She recounts a story about her son returning from an errand in Manchester village, and as he passed the hill on his return, he was met by the angel who chastised him for being negligent concerning the plates, and that the time was now come when the record should be brought forth. She then remarks, it was signified to him when he should make another effort to obtain the plates, which was September 22nd, 1827. But at this time, he did not make this known to us. So he wasn't making these annual visits that the family anticipated were happening. This explains why Lucy was the only one in the house, including visitors Joseph Knight Sr. and Josiah Stoll, who knew that Joseph and Emma had gone to the hill. And that was only because she saw them leave. So that's why I say that 1825, 1826 wasn't, there was no continuity in Joseph Smith's story about visiting the hill the same year. He brought up the story of the plates. He revived it in order to go and get them and start a new career, religious career, instead of money digging career. But when he told the story in 1838, he connected it with the previous thing, with the later thing, as if it was meant to be all along.
And can I
So-
just say a couple things?
Go.
First off, when I look at these 4 years from 1823 to 1827, and this idea, which I just took for granted when I was a TBM, which is that for some reason, according to Joseph Smith's account, it takes 4 years that this spirit or angel can appear to him only one night a year. He's apparently unable to give him any communication at any other time. And this is why it takes 4 years, because he's appearing, according to 1838 history by Joseph Smith, to give him further instructions each year. So the angel can only appear to Joseph Smith on the equinox and only at that location, although he shows up in his bedroom initially. So around that area, but on that same time. And it strikes me that what Joseph Smith seems to be doing is playing for time in a way to explain that actually things have been going on during this 4-year period. It's just only been happening once a year. So it seems like he needs that time for some other reason. And I'm getting the sense that this is an excuse to cover what the real reason is.
That could be also, but remember, Lucy gives the story of Joseph Smith sitting around the family. And this is where Alvin was instrumental in gathering the family together. And they would sit around Joseph, and Joseph would tell the stories about the Nephites and the stories that were contained in this book and the ancient inhabitants of the Americas, as if he lived among them. He was practicing these stories. He's telling these stories. I believe he was reading the book parts out of the book while the book was still in the hill. So he undoubtedly he was thinking about what he was going to write. But even after he gets the plates from the hill, he dictates starts dictating the lost 116-page manuscript that we always talk about in February of 1828, and he loses that, and he doesn't dictate anything of substance really until Oliver Cowdery gets there in April of 1829. I mean, that's like a couple of years almost. So, yeah, he has plenty of time to think about it. We do have last slide.
Okay, and we have 2 callers on the line too. So I think they should be able to hear this show. So if you guys are listening, if you just hang tight just a little bit longer.
Yeah, here's our close-up of the night of the 21st to the 22nd of September 1827, which is the new moon. So this is a significant night for getting treasure. And on this night, Lucy reported that she was up late on the night of the 21st of September 1827 when she saw Joseph and Emma leave the house. They took Joseph Knight Sr.'s horse and wagon. Knight arrived at the Smiths the day before with Josiah Stoll, according to Martin Harris, for the purpose of digging for money. So in his history, Knight mentioned that at some point after the 1824 failure, Joseph had looked in his stone and saw that Emma was Alvin's replacement.
Convenient.
And there, we kind of nice place to stop, even though the story keeps on going. But
it is really interesting to me, Dan, that not only has Joseph Smith's treasure digging, excuse me. Okay. That was
he's dicking around.
That was Freudian. I apologize. Okay, digging, damn it. Okay. Joseph Smith's treasure digging was not restricted to the early 1820s. It goes on through the end of the 1820s, I think, and maybe even beyond that. And I think that's true. But we have an account here from a friendly source, and that was Joseph Knight Sr., correct? Is that the person we're quoting, or is it, who are we quoting?
Yeah. Joseph Knight Sr.
Okay.
Is.
Okay, so but the treasure digging that Joseph Smith appears to be involved in is going on right up to the very night that he gets the plates from the hillside.
Yes, and there's a well-known quote from Martin Harris, the 1859 interview that he had with Joel Tiffany, mentioned that after he gets the plates, it's after he gets the plates, the angel told him he must quit the money diggers.
Well, that's a smart angel. I wish he had
Well,
said
and
that
then
earlier.
they're all trying to get the plates. They think that they have some kind of interest in the plates because they were a money digging company. They had the money diggers 2 years previously had dug for the gold plates themselves based on where Lawrence told them where the plates were, where Joseph Smith showed Lawrence the plates. But Joseph Smith later said that he showed Lawrence the wrong place. He showed Lawrence the plates were on the east side, which is the favorite side of the hill to dig on for the money diggers. They dug a hole there looking for the plates, but of course didn't find any plates. And that Joseph Smith later, in the history that he wrote with Oliver Cowdery, said the plates were on the west side in the stone box. So Lorenzo Saunders is the one that says that the day after Joseph said that he got these plates, the money diggers, himself included, he went up, they went up, and they walked the hill by course looking for any fresh dirt. And the only dirt they found was the hole that the money diggers had dug 2 years previously.
Right. So they're doing what you're suggesting Joseph Smith Sr. would have done with Alvin's grave.
Well, they dug it. They were persistent and dug it up.
Yeah, just looking for fresh dirt. Has somebody been digging here?
Looking for fresh dirt. Oh yeah, right, exactly. That now I get it. So we have the money diggers believing what Joseph Smith is saying. They're swallowing it all. It all makes sense to them, and it especially makes sense to one certain money digger that Joseph Smith was primarily interested in convincing, and that was Joseph Smith Sr., his father.
It sounds like he was very convinced if he's digging up his oldest kid.
I would say.
The ghosts are growling. They're grumbling. The ghosts are grumbling over.
Very demanding.
Nothing says I believe in Mormonism like digging up your dead child.
Yeah.
What,
there's no Mormonism.
I don't know. I thought that was funny.
Okay.
Should we go to calls to our first callers?
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Okay, so this is someone.
Hello? Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 hello. Hi. Okay. I'm gonna read in a second. Just give me a second. I gotta just do something really quickly. I'm probably gonna make another coffee. I only have 4 more pages to read, and then we're done with Mormonism and Kabbalah. So we've done Mormonism and Masonry. We've done Mormonism and Kabbalah. Next, I have a big paper to read on Mormonism and Zionism. We still have a while to go in Mormonism, guys. I'm not giving up on Mormonism yet. I might do about 20 of these or something like that. Oh, man. At least I find these things interesting. I hope you guys too, though less of you find this interesting than what I used to do, which was just, I guess, fight with people on here or whatever, have idiots on. They've all stopped commenting. Well, the idiots, they're not watching anymore, they're not commenting. You know, I'm probably happier for it. Well, I enjoy my streams more now that I'm actually learning stuff. You know, that I'm actually learning stuff. Oh, what is this? Okay, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to focus on when I get to Christian Science. Hold on, my coffee's just being made. The book Ms. Eddy, which I might want to read, is really long, and I don't have enough video content on Christian Science, I don't think. I don't have enough video content on Christian Science to break that big of a book up. I've never read anything that was 800 pages that I was trying to break up. And I want to read it for another project of mine on another website, which I don't want to mix it with the commentary on this from this blog, from my Be Wise as Serpents blog. Remember, you can get all these talks and stuff at bewiseserpents.blogspot.com. You can always get it there. Okay, I don't want to read. Okay. Actually, you know what? I don't want to read just yet, so we're gonna listen to the rest of this and then I'll read.
One called Before, and they introduced themselves as Mahanrai before. So, and I think that might be like Mahanrai from our chat. So, let me get this up here. Okay, is this Mahanrai? Oh no. Hi there. I just want to make sure. Yeah, RFM, Dan, can you guys hear?
I can hear you.
Anybody.
Can you hear the caller?
No.
No.
It seems they cannot hear. Hold on one second. So you guys can't hear?
No, we
Nope.
can't hear.
Sorry, one second.
I'd like to say we're just kidding you, but we're not.
I wish. And he's not hearing me either, it seems like.
Oh no.
Oh, okay. Shoot. Okay, I'm trying to think what it is that I can do.
Can you hear him at all?
I do hear
Hold
him.
the-
Do you want to just say what your question is? You can do it
Hold the phone up to the microphone. Get a phone and put it on the microphone like the professor, the backyard professor.
Yes. Those quality videos the backyard professor does.
I go ahead, caller, and I'll just say what it is.
Oh, he's going to be calling me any second. Wow, this is killer radio right here. This is okay. Hang on a second. You keep listening. I got a call here from Carrie. Carrie, how you doing? Okay, yeah. I'm glad you're watching the show. Yes, we know about your Backyard Professor podcast. Yes, they're wonderful. You are the best. Yes, you are. I agree with you 100%. Okay, thanks, Carrie. Love you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Sorry about that, guys.
Okay.
Did you talk to Backyard Professor on the phone? Is that
No.
what you're saying?
No.
Okay. I think that's who's
It was a commercial.
I was just
commercial.
kidding. I'm trying to do something to fill this dead
It
air.
was a commercial pretending to be a call.
Yes.
I just don't know what's happening because I've got my phone is paired with my Roadcaster, so it should be coming through. That's what we've done before. So I hear it's the Backyard Professor. And are you guys still not hearing anything?
No, I consider this bliss.
Okay, shoot. I don't know what to do. Hold on, Backyard Professor.
Hold
I'm
on,
trying
Backyard
to think,
Professor.
guys.
I'm sure he has a question. Can he put it in 3 words or less?
Can you put your question in 3 words or less? Okay, now I don't hear him at all. Are you there? Okay, can you? He said,
think
"All right,
he's
Ben said your
called-
question in 3 words or less." Oh, that's your question. Are you guys sane? He said it's typed in the chat there.
Okay, I have someone who's on the phone that we could put on while we're waiting for the backyard professor to figure out what 3 words he wants to.
Oh,
frame his
Bill
question.
Real. Hi, Bill.
No, it's not Bill.
No,
This is a guy named Trevor. Oh, sorry. I almost said
No.
your last name. Should I say
Okay.
that?
It starts with an L.
It's just Trevor. No, there's no L's here. I'm going to put you on. Okay, let's see how this works. Okay, you're on speaker and you are on Mormonism Live. Do you have a question for Professor Vogel?
I do have a question for Professor Vogel. Usually when you talk about Joseph Smith's magical activity, and treasure digging, you keep the subject focused on folk magic and related topics. But recently, more work has been done on the Freemasonic angle. I'm thinking of the new book by Nick Lachersky and Cheryl Bruno and Joe Swick. And something that's really come up in my mind as I look at the evidence is that every once in a while I see a kind of overlap between the magical and the Freemasonic. And I was wondering whether you think those two are synthesized in any way in the Smith practices in magic, treasure digging, or whether you're only interested in the magic side of things.
Is it all right if we go ahead and allow Dan to take that question? Do you want to stay on for a follow-up possibly?
Yeah, I'll just hang up. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Trevor. What do you think there, Professor Vogel?
I do not see any Masonic influence dealing with the coming forth of the Book of Mormon or the first vision or anything. I do not agree with the authors of the new book. I have profound disagreements with trying to force parallels. They're not very good parallels. The first vision is more like evangelical Christian narratives, which all have a similar pattern. I do not see any Masonic influence in the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, which we're talking about right now. I see Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon being anti-Masonic, not pro-Masonic. I do not see any pro-Masonic elements in the Book of Mormon. The first inkling that you get of a maybe what you would call a pro-Masonic influence on Mormonism comes with the Danites in Missouri, and then a little bit, the Book of Abraham. Excuse me, that's 1835. That's 1835.
And there you're talking about the 2 different priesthoods, the one through Pharaoh, who was a great guy and everything, but he didn't have the right authority.
Yeah, well, in the alphabet and grammar mentions Masonic signs, basically, that there's a sign for that messengers give, there's no like full context to that. It's just an interpretation of 3 signs and messengers that give the sign of grief and distress, as Masons know it. So I see that as the first solid influence showing up there in the Book of Abraham. Of course, the Egyptians very important to Masonry. And then with the Danites in 1838, they used the kind of signs and penalties associated with the secrecy involved. But even there, I think the authors of this new book overblow the parallels again, but they're there, but not as many or diverse as they would like to make it appear. And then actually the more fuller embrace of Masonry comes in Nauvoo with the temple endowment, where Joseph Smith more or less borrows or Mormonizes the Masonic ceremony for his temple endowment. But at the same time, he downgrades Masonry and says it's an apostate endowment, and that it's a corrupt, or whatever he says about the priesthood. He has there's two main statements, but he doesn't. I don't believe in the pure Masonry and the spurious Masonry explanation in the Book of Mormon. Masonry, the signs of Masonry, the signs and the key words are the identifiers of the secret combinations. There's no competing signs and secret words of a pure Masonry in the Book of Mormon. It only talks about secret combinations, and it's all anti-Masonic rhetoric, and it ties in with what's going on with the 1828 election of Andrew Jackson. So Joseph Smith is consistent in his view that in the Book of Mormon, there's only secret combinations. In Nauvoo, he doesn't say there's a pure that Masonry is pure. He says it's all corrupt, the whole thing. There isn't a true Masonry and a false Masonry. And the authors and Clyde Forsberg in his Equal Rights book tried to call on George Oliver's 1823 book. George Oliver doesn't talk about spurious Masonry until the second edition of 1840s, sometime in 1840. And Joseph Smith Oliver doesn't say, he says there's a pure Masonry, and then there's this spurious Masonry, and it's part of the current Masonic institution is the pure Masonry. The corrupt Masonry are these mystery cults of the heathens. So in Nauvoo, Joseph Smith isn't like George Oliver at all. He's saying all of Masonry has been corrupted or apostate. They're an apostate endowment, and so they're not saying George Oliver and Joseph Smith are not saying the same thing. Anyway, that's my take on this new book.
Well, I will tell you that we're planning on having Cheryl Bruno on the show in 2 weeks, Dan, so she will be able to give the competing argument on the subject. I think she actually has my cell phone. She could call in if she wanted to. I have no idea if she's making comments in the comment section. I have to have it turned off so I can focus on 3 things at once. And now I think we've lost Maven. Maven? It says her device is not connected. We could be left to our own devices.
Oh, we'll have to stay through the whole equinox.
The entire night we'll be here. Actually, I have to be getting out to a nearby drumlin hill myself. Just a little Kimura humor there. Wow. Here, maybe I should call Maven and see what the heck's going on. Maybe, because I don't even know if we can stop this show without Maven. We're like the runaway train. Yes, you're playing the part of John Voight. Let's see.
You can't even get a call. Give your cell phone so they can call you.
I don't think I'm going to do that publicly. I think that's a great idea, except for one flaw that I've spotted. Okay, hang on a second here, folks. Trying to get a hold of Maven.
Hello.
Hi. We're trying to end the show, and we don't know how. This could be the podcast that never ends. It's like Sherry doing lamb chop.
There you go. You can start singing.
Okay.
Here we go.
Hello, hello, hello. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's read the last 4 pages and then I'm out. Okay. Woo. And then we're done with Freemasonry and Kabbalah. In attempting to understand Joseph Smith and his religious vision, historians have examined both the religious sparks kindled by his time and the social soils from which the young prophet sprang. As useful as some of these efforts have been, I still agree with Paul Edwards. Our methods so far have been too traditional and unimaginative to comprehend Joseph's history. We remain even now blind by the fears of yesterday or biased by its erroneous judgments. Chiefs among the subjects that might be feared is Mormon history is Joseph's apparent recurrent association with the occult traditions of Western spirituality, and this remains the area of the history least examined and understood. It is impossible for me to present fresh evidence which seemingly links Joseph Smith to what might interpret as the occult without addressing this wider issue. The historical record witnesses that Joseph Smith had some intercourse with at least 3 important manifestations of the alternative and non-orthodox religious traditions that blossomed in the Renaissance and post-Renaissance period, traditions sometimes labeled as the occult, ceremonial magic, masonry, and Kabbalah. These associations extended throughout his history, and his liaison with each constituted more than casual acquaintance. This is an area of history for which Mormon historians have been hesitant to turn full attention, an area where our fears, our ignorances have declined our understanding. Where our fears, our ignorances have delimited our understanding. It would be foolish at this late date to maintain that any single tradition engendered Joseph Smith's religious vision. Joseph was an American original, and we need not fear him being cast as a Masonic pundit, folk magician, Rosicrucian mystic, medieval Kabbalistic, or ancient Gnostic. Nevertheless, we must recognize that something in the nature of the prophet, some element of his own intrinsic vision, did resonate with the occult traditions of the Western spiritual quest. Into the spirit and matter of his religious legacy, he wove these sympathies. Joseph carried his silver talisman inscribed with the sigil of Jupiter in Hebrew letters, cast in a magic square upon his person to his death. He called Masonry a remnant of the true priesthood, and over 1,000 of his men in Nauvoo, including nearly every then current or future priesthood leader of his nascent church, went through the 3 separate steps of ritual initiation, leading to the degree of Master Mason. In his last months, amid dissension and danger, he found him time to sit and read Hebrew and perhaps study Kabbalah and the Zohar with Alexander Nabar. In April 1844, when his congregation expected retrenchment and reconciliation, he turned to the Hebrew and bequeathed to his disciples an extraordinary vision of God, a theosophical pronouncement which echoed the tone of Kabbalah even to the ear of a critic so far removed in time and culture as Harold Bloom. In this last link, Joseph's sympathy for Kabbalah, which may be the key that finally unlocks a pattern and opens a new methodology for understanding the prophet Joseph Smith, as Richard Bushman noted, the power of Enlightenment skepticism had far less influence on Joseph Smith. Joseph told of the visits of angels, of direct inspiration of voice in the chamber of Father Whittemer without embarrassment. He prized the Urim and Thummim and the seer stone, never repudiating them, even when the major charge against him was was that he used magic to find buried money. His word was not created by English. His world was not created by Enlightenment rationalism with its deathly aversion to superstition. The prophet brought into modern America elements of more ancient culture in which the sacred and the profane intermingled, and the saints enjoyed supernatural gifts and powers as the frequent blessing of an interested God. Joseph Smith did indeed bring into American elements of an ancient culture, but that culture was not temporarily very distinct from the prophet. When Joseph was introduced to Jewish Kabbalah in his classic form in Nauvoo, he found consciously or unconsciously the fiber of a thread woven throughout the fabric of his life. The magic he met as a youth, the prophetic interpretation of scripture, and opening of canon to divine relations, all Masonic symbol systems, all of these relations of an heterodox Hermetic religious tradition that had persisted in various occult fashions within the Western religious tradition for centuries, a tradition of which Kabbalah was a most important part. Call the tradition occult if you wish. Certainly, to survive, it was at times hidden, but do not err by seeing it as simply a legacy of ideas from which the young prophet might pick and choose. This tradition, as is now well accepted by scholars, was driven by the phenomenon of a rare human experience. As interwoven into Hermeticism, Kabbalah was a tradition not just of theosophical assertion, but of return to prophetic vision. For a millennium or more, perhaps dating all the way back to the supposed heresy of the Gnostics, men and women within this larger tradition asserted the reality of their vision and sometimes even used that what now seems modern psychological insight in dealing with their experiences. Individuals caught in the experience not uncommonly saw themselves as prophets, though the force of the tradition sought to maintain a balance in the face of such realization. Many of them thought themselves as kings and queens before God, and some openly proclaimed their royalty. They probed the mystery of Adam and Eve and primal creation, and they embraced rituals and symbols as nonverbal expressions of ineffable insight. Their sexuality was sacralized, and not infrequently their ineffable insights. Their sexuality was sacralized, and not infrequently their sacred sexual practices ranged beyond the bounds of expression accepted by the societies of their time. Their most sacred mystery, the great Mysterium Cognitum, was sometimes ecstatically mirrored in the holy union of a man and a woman. Then authored pseudographic works involved ancient voices as their own. They would know they told new stories about God, became for them God because for them God was a living story, and they found their own lives mingled with a story being told by a living God. When Joseph sought a mirror to understand himself, if he found reflection in a history not so distant as that of ancient Israel. His story of the prophet's story lived with the occult legacy of his time. He touched that legacy often, and he saw in it the image, even if dimmed and distorted, of a priesthood he shared. Joseph Smith's life reflected the nature of an unusual human experience, and to understand his history, we must understand his experience in the context of history. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung dedicated the last half of his long life to elucidating the nature and psychological insights of the Kabbalistic Hermetic alchemical tradition. He felt it helped the pearl of great price. He felt it held the pearl of great price, the treasure forgotten by Christianity and the Enlightenment, Protestant evolution. It was at the Aranus conference, dominated by Jung, that Gershom Scholem, the preeminent pioneer of Kabbalistic studies, opened the eyes of Western scholarship to the traditions important in our history. Moshe Adel Sholem's brilliant and independent protege has subsequently reaffirmed the value of the psychological perception in understanding its phenomenon with the insight augmented by Shlom's work. The historian Francis Yates pioneered a new understanding of the vast influence of the occult tradition in Renaissance and reformative culture, and recently Harold Bloom has pointed to its import in the creative vision of modern times. Perhaps the thrust of this scholarship is now reaching the cloisters of Mormon history. But should that indeed be the case, Mormon historians must understand that they are embarking into a different methodology of history. A prophet's history flows from two springs, one above and one below, both melding in currents of his life. What story from above the prophet may have heard will remain his secret. The history to man knows, but by turning to the larger realm of prophetic history and its occult legacy, the record of its aspiration, its symbols and lore, and the enigmatic histories of the women and men who have been caught in this unique human experience, we may begin to find a methodology that leads us with new wonders into the unknown history of Joseph Smith. Done. Okay. Oh, I'm done, guys. Okay. I will talk to you guys later. Thanks for listening. Bye.